Mike Phillips here, and I am the CEO or Chief Education Officer for Dr. Beasley's, and we're here in our Stewart facility where we teach all of our intensely hands-on classes. We recently shot a video called Beginner's Guide to Car Polishing. And that video, out of all the videos on the Dr. Beasley's YouTube channel, has become the most popular, and the comments are out of this world. And basically all we did is Yancey, my film guy, and me, we came out here and I just tried to do what I call a brain dump on how to tackle a car if you're a beginner. I also included a lot of topics and techniques if you're an advanced detailer, a professional, because I've been doing this a long time and I always feel like I got something to share. And me, myself, I try to be a perpetual student. When someone's talking, I shut up, I listen, because maybe I'll learn something. In this video, we're going to be doing a deeper dive over process and technique, the different processes you use to take something from neglected to respected, and the techniques and the tools and the products to go with it. Things like comparing rotary versus free spinning random orbital versus gear driven orbital, pad stalling, how to overcome pad stalling when you get into these concave curves, paint thickness gauges, how to understand the thickness of the paint you're working on, edge work. You know, edge work is really important. I've got some cool micro tools to show you how to do that. I'm also going to show you how to do that by hand and using a full-size rotary. You can do it either way. And then we're going to be covering things like speed, amount of pressure to put on the tool, the number of passes to make to get the job done in a timely manner, how to correctly do a test spot. I messed up in the last video, so I'm going to make up for it in this video. We'll also cover topics like paint temperature, how hot is too hot, you know, when you're buffing, you know, you start to warm up that paint, and other topics like the path of travel. So I kind of touched on this in the other video. How do you start once you dial in your test spot? How do you go about detailing the entire car? And where most videos, including a lot of videos I've made, you just see the instructor standing next to the car working on the hood, we're going to show you how to do this entire car in this video, so there'll be any doubt or guesses of how you should approach your car when you take what you learn here into your garage. And of course we'll cover things like how many pads does it take, you know, how to use a pad washer towards the end of the video. But really it's just going to be a very in-depth brain dump covering process and technique. Enough of me talking, let's get into it. So the first thing you want to do before you detail a car is very obvious. You want to wash the car and get it clean. And I've already done that. I was down here Monday morning washing this car. First thing I did was clean the wheels and tires, start at the top, work my way down. And this thing was filthy. And I took a video before and some pictures to show you just how bad it was. But I think the video that we got right now after the wash shows you really how bad this car is. And this could make a great demo car just because of the paint condition. Now, there's two schools of thought on clay in a car. So I've clayed the entire car except I left this portion up here done because in the last video I showed you how to use a clay bar. So here's kind of an example of some clay bars. This is a Mother's clay bar. This is a Dr. Beasley's fine grade. They come in what looks like a bar of soap, an old school bar of soap. And what you do is you take these out, and again, as I showed in that video, what was the name of the thing? Beginner's Guide to Car Polishing. And I showed you how to take and knead it and use clay the correct way. Well, this time I'm going to show you how to use a clay towel. But here's a tip I came up with when these things were first invented. When they were first invented, basically, just let me explain what this is. Clay is polybutane plastic with a pulverized abrasive in it. So the way clay works is when you rub over the surface, even though it is sticky, it doesn't work by pulling things off. It works by abrading anything that's sticking above the surface off, and then because it's sticky, it holds it onto itself. So that's how clay works, and it's actually a really good process. I'm a big fan of using fine grade clays on show cars because I don't want to put extra marring in. But after clay was invented, a couple other tools came out. We call them clay substitutes. So there's the clay towel, the clay mitt, and the clay disc. Okay, so the clay mitt would be if you're washing the car, after you fully rinsed it, you could actually just dip that clay mitt into your soapy water or foam the car and then rub that over the paint and clay it during what I call the wet work, during the wash process. You could also grab a clay towel and do it. And even if you wanted to, there's a thing called a clay disc. I don't have one here, but that attaches to a random orbital polisher or a gear-driven orbital polisher, not a rotary, but you want an orbital polisher of some sort. And you could actually do that in the wet work process too, as long as you're using a cordless so you don't get shocked. Out of the three, my favorite though, besides clay, is the towel. And the reason I like the towel is because sometimes when I'm working on a car, I may need to take and fold this in a way to get into a tight area. And the clay disc and the clay mitt are just a little bit more awkward. So they all do the same things, personal preference, I just like this. But when these things first came out, and this is the Nanoskin brand, I think this is like 60 bucks. They're not cheap. You get a lot of cars out of them, so it's a good value for money, especially since you understand, I'm not going to drop this, but if you were to drop it on the ground, if it was detailing clay, you'd have to throw it away. With this, you could take it over to the sink, wash it off, make sure it's clean, go back to using it. But when they first came out, I thought for 60 bucks, you know, I want to know how I can get the best bang for my buck with this thing. So I came up with a really simple idea, but first let me just show you the way you use this. You don't spread it out flat and then, you know, move it around in the paint like that. You take and you fold it into 4 sections like this. And then the idea being to get the most use out of your towel is you have to know which side of the towel you started out using. And then once it kind of wears out, go to another side. So here's what I came up with. It's real simple. I just took a Sharpie marker and I drew a grid pattern on here, and I put a 1, 2, and a 3, and a 4. So when I fold this thing 4 ways, I'm going to start out using section 1. And at some point in my detailing world, if I feel this just is no longer removing any contaminants, I'm going to switch over to number 2. And I will tell you, as you use this and it gets wet, this will kind of wear off. Just grab your Sharpie marker when it's dry and put the numbers and the plus sign on there. So anyway, so let me go ahead and show you how to use this. So if I fold it like this and like this and pull this up, and we've got the number 1 right there. So that's this side. So that's a technique that may help you, it may not, but that's what I do. Okay, so this is actually Dr. Beasley's prep wash. We do make a clay lube. You could use a spray detailer. One of the things I like about this product is not only can you use it, it is technically a waterless wash, it's also a great interior cleaner. Thank you, Russell. But it also works as a clay lube. Okay, so now let me see if you can kind of hear this. I don't know if you can pick up on that, but this thing's pretty rough. But the way you use this is just like I showed you. I fold it. I always teach people, you know, to use this like a clamp. So I'm going to clamp this with my thumb on one corner, the corner, not the rubber side or the rubber corner. And then it doesn't really matter which way you move your hand, but you just want to get that thing moving, let inertia kind of work for you. Make sure you use plenty of lube. And of course, you want to do this to the entire car. And I will tell you, as bad as this car is, the sides weren't as contaminated as the horizontal surfaces. And the reason for that is because when there's contamination in the air, it lands on the horizontal surfaces. Now, if it's something sticky, like overspray paint, a couple weeks ago, I'm driving down the road, saw some people painting a house, the big old air sprayer, overspray everywhere. But if it's sticky, it will hit the sides of the car if there's any kind of wind out there. And of course, you can have contaminants on the vertical panels. But the only way to really know that is to do the Baggie test, which I forgot to show, but I will in a second. Okay, so once I got this side clay, and again, I've already clayed the rest of the car just to speed this video up. Okay, and at some point, I would take this over to my slop sink. You could do this at your house in your kitchen sink. And sometimes these things stick together, but just pull them apart like that. It kind of reinvigorates the abrasive mix in the polymerized rubber. I would just lay this thing down flat. I would grab a brush of some sort like this, actually a little less aggressive brush, but I would just run water and even just use some hand soap and just give it a good wash, hang it someplace to dry, and you're good to go the next time you want to use it though. Okay, I'm going to show you this for some other things too. Okay, let me grab my baggie. Hopefully we won't film anything after this. And of course, as you work around the car, you want to remove that clay lube. I don't get too bent out of shape about trying to make this look pretty because I'm just going to come up and buff it. But I do want to get any residue I loosened, any contamination I loosened off, and of course get most of the residue off also. Okay, and technically I should have done this before, but this is the baggie. I know it seems like okay, that is smooth. So the clay towel works really well. The Baggie test, someone asked me, I had a class this last weekend, one of the students says, why use a baggie? Well, the reason you use a baggie is because it's pretty easy. Most households have it. So you have a baggie around your house. You can go out and wash your car and fill your paint. But what it does is it increases your own natural sensitivity. So by putting that baggie in your hand, it's easier to feel what's going on at the surface level of your paint versus just trying to use your human skin. So that's what the Baggie test is for. Back in the old days, a lot of guys would use cigarette wrappers. To me, cigarette wrappers, they're kind of crispy, kind of stiff plastic. I don't want to be scratching the paint when I'm feeling it. And when you do the Baggie test, you do want to use a light touch. You could take, if you had a flawless black finish, and rub that Baggie and scratch the heck out of it. And also, let's just talk about clay marring or clay towel marring. The act of rubbing a clay bar or any of the polymerized substances substitutes, the clay mitt, the clay towel, the clay disc, it's going to mar the surface. It doesn't matter if you use a lot of lube. Now here's the deal. If you're working on a black car, probably show up. If you're working on a light color car, probably won't show up, but it's still happening. So my own general rule, and what I teach in our classes here, is if a car comes to the class or comes to me, and I, after washing it, do the Baggie test and discover it's contaminated, I've already factored in at least one machine polishing step for the entire car to remove any of the marring put in by the mechanical decontamination process, whether you're using detailing clay or a clay towel. Anyway, that's the thing. And then there's a little bit of a controversy, but I will go ahead and go down that rabbit hole. There's two options. You can, and I prefer claying a car during the wet work. So I got the car out there, I've washed it, I've done a thorough rinse, and that's the key to clay a car in the wash process is after you've loosened up all the dirt, you really got to flush it off good. So at some point, if there's, what you don't want to happen is a piece of abrasive particle that you loosen in the wash process, but you didn't rinse off, and then you trap it between the rubber surface, the rubber surface of the clay towel, the mitt, or the clay disc, or a clay bar, and then push that across the paint and scratch the paint. So the key with doing the mechanical decontamination process during the wet wash is to make sure you wash it and thoroughly rinse it. And then you could either foam the car or just dip your, whatever you're going to use into your soapy water. You could spray some soapy water on there or some clay lube, just something lubricated as you rub it. But the problem with doing the claying process during the wash process is you don't know if the paint is hard or soft until you do the test spot. When do you do the test spot? You do the test spot after you wash and dry the car. So if you wash the car, rinse it, and clay it while it's wet, and then you bring it back into your shop under the lights and go, wow, look, I'm the word mar is like the kind, fluffy way of saying scratch, okay? So you scratch the car at the claying process. The difference being is if you would have stopped into the test spot first and found out it was soft paint, then I would try to the best of my ability, get what's called an ultra fine clay bar. So it's not aggressive, and I would use that to clay soft paint versus any of the other option, a medium grade, a coarse grade, or any of the polymerized rubber substitutes. So I just want to point that out because in my life, I've worked on a lot of cars with very soft paint, and you can see the marring left by whatever you use. So there you go. So there's clay. Okay, so we've got that clay. That means this entire car is now clayed. So the next thing we want to talk about is doing a test spot. Now, in the last video, or that video that we shot that I referenced earlier called Beginner's Guide to Car Polishing, I made a huge mistake, and it was actually quite embarrassing because a bunch of people pointed it out in the comments. But one of the things I shared was back in 1988, I wrote my first how-to book. And when people in the industry around the world now use the term test spot, if you go to the index under getting started, it says right here, performing a test spot by hand, performing a test spot by machine. The published date of this is 1998. So as I said in the other video, I may not be the guy that invented the term test spot, although I think I am. I am the guy that can document it back further than anybody else. And all I wanted to really kind of point out about that is I feel very qualified in teaching other people how and why to do a test spot. And the short behind the scenes story is that is a lot of you younger guys won't remember this, but in the early days of the internet, we didn't have Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, TikTok, any of the stuff. But there was this thing called the Usenet news groups, and there was a section in there called Rec Autos Misc, and I was always up there posting how-to information, and this would be back in the 1990s, 90, 91, 92, 93. I was posting how-to articles on the Usenet news group, and I came across a guy, and this is where the test spot came from. I came across this guy, and he says, hey Mike, I just compounded my entire car, and then after washing the compound off, I looked at it, it's just completely full of scratches. And I was kind of taken back. I was kind of aghast, and I just kind of says, well, here's a good practice. What you should have done is after you wash and dry the car was take that product you bought, whatever it was, and just applied it according to how you were going to apply to the directions, and then looked at the results. And then if you found out it was scratching the heck out of your paint, because a lot of old school compounds did that, you could have stopped right there and only had to fix that spot. What you did is you did the entire car, you messed up the entire car, now you got to fix the entire car, and you can't use what you're using because obviously it wasn't work. So that's where I really started putting a lot of emphasis on test spot, was trying to teach people to test whatever it is they're buying, because I'm dealing with people around the world. I don't know what products they're buying, but make sure it works. And in the detailing world, let me just go down this rabbit hole. The most difficult thing to make is the compounds, the polishes, and the all-in-ones, the cleaner waxes, okay? Because they all use abrasives. And I always tell people this, that when it comes to polishing paint, the most important factor is the abrasive technology, okay? I meet a lot of detailers that are alpha males, kind of ego-driven, and they take a jacked up car like this and make it look beautiful. Then they're kind of like, oh yeah, I am so good. And you are good if you fixed it, but you were not touching the paint. The abrasive technology was touching the paint, followed by the pad, followed by the tool, followed by the tool running the tool, the guy or the girl. Okay, so the most important thing is the abrasive technology, because if you're using a compound or a polish that just doesn't use very good abrasive technology, it doesn't matter how much technique you throw at it. If it's what bad abrasive technology does is it'll remove a defect, but it leaves its own defect behind. We usually call that micromarring or holograms, but that's what bad abrasive technology does. Good abrasive technology removes a defect and doesn't leave anything behind. You can go to the next step. So if you start out using something with bad abrasive technology, it doesn't matter how much technique or if you change tools or pads you throw at it. If it's removing a defect and leaving its own defect, you're really going backwards in the process. You're not going to get the results you want. And it all started with what was touching the paint. So back to the test spot. The reason you do the test spot after you've washed and clayed the car is first to make sure you can fix the paint. I've come across cars with paint that nobody can fix. They need to be repainted. And that's why you don't see this car taped off. I don't tape off the car till I dial in my test spot. I want to make sure I can fix it. If I wash the car and clay it and I think, well, I know I'll get it all taped off, then I'll start working on it. And then I do the test spot and find out I can't fix it. I just wasted time, steps, and all my masking tape. So do the test spot first. Then if you find you can fix the car, then you want to go ahead and tape off any plastic. And this, we're going to show you, this car has a lot of what's called pebble textured black plastic trim. And pebble texture means if you feel it, it's almost as though it came out of a sand mold. It has little hills and valleys. It's very textured. And if you accidentally run a compound or a polish or say an AIO into that, chances are really good you're going to permanently stain it. Now, if the car is brand new and the trim is brand new, our products are very trim friendly. I still tape off every car just from experience. But what happens when you get older plastic, like this is a 2018, so it's 2000, so that means what, 7 years old? It's 7 years old and it's neglected. The trim is faded and dried out. So now if you run your polisher over old trim, chances are you'll permanently stain it. Brand new car, new trim, probably be able to get it off, no problem. But once you stain old plastic trim, it's game over. So that's why you wait and tape off until after you've done the test spot. Now, a part of that test spot that I showed in the first video where I made my mistake was if you do a test spot, and when you do a test spot, you usually use, you don't want to use pads or products at the extreme. So at one extreme, say if you got a fine cut polish, and at the other extreme you got a heavy cut compound. Well, for your test spot, you want to kind of use something in the middle, just kind of a normal polish or a medium cut polish. Same thing with pads. You don't want to start with a finishing pad. You don't want to start with a super aggressive pad. You want to go right in the center, use a polishing pad, and then do your test spot and then look at the results. And if they do not look good, and here's where I made the mistake, you don't do the test spot in the same place, you've already abraded that section. Your results will be skewed. So you need to move over and do a new test spot in virgin territory. And if that test spot doesn't look good, then you would go to a new section. So every time you do a test spot, you want to retest in new territory. You don't want to go back to where you've already been testing because your results will be skewed. And just to kind of reiterate, in that last video, that previous video, Beginner's Guide to Car Polishing, the reason I didn't cover the importance of moving to a new section every time you do a test spot isn't because I don't know to do that. It's just a lot of times my brain gets so busy trying to make sure I cover everything that I forget something, and that was the thing I forgot. Okay, so So let's go ahead and we'll do our first test spot. And as we're doing this, let me go ahead and just try to again do a brain dump. So one of the things people are always asking about are paint thickness gauges. This is the row point coating thickness gauge. So coating thickness, paint thickness, same kind of thing. So the first thing I'm gonna do is and I have a full tutorial on this tool on the Dr. Beasley's blog. Probably if you search row point, Mike Phillips, probably pull that article right up. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And I've already done some measurements. This paint is actually, we believe it to be the factory paint, and it's very thin. 4.17 mils. So let me just share, what does that mean? Okay, and I know a lot of you guys measure microns, and let me be the first to admit, microns is more accurate because it's just a more smaller size of measuring, so everything's more accurate. The problem is I grew up in America where we didn't use the metric system, and I grew up using mils. So one of the things that I've always taught people, I have an article that dates back about 20 years, if you take your average Post-it note and pull off just a single Post-it note and hold it between your thumb and your finger, okay, it's pretty easy for you to wrap your brain around and go, wow, that's really thin, okay? The clear coat layer, not the black, not the primer, but just the clear layer of paint on a factory finish tends nowadays to be thinner than a Post-it note. The Post-it notes are around 3 mils, factory clears 2 mils or less. So the reason I do this is so someone does that and goes, oh wow, that's really thin. Okay, and let that sink in. Maybe you don't want to be compounding really hard on your car because you just don't have that much paint there. But let me show you another way to do this because maybe you don't have a Post-it note handy. Here's just a basic dollar bill. And I can't do math in my head, but the rest of you can. But let's go ahead. I'm going to try to measure in exactly the same place. 4.17, I'm just going to lift it up, slide this in, 6.92. And again, I can't do math in my head, but that's right around 3 mils, give or take a few increments. And most people have a dollar bill. So again, you can hold the dollar bill between your thumb and the finger. Wow, that's really thin. Okay, well, that's how thin your clear coat is. And that's why I like cars like this over here. There's a 1970 Satellite. It's from the class we had just last week, and I had 8 cars here. This was one of them. We did a full paint correction and ceramic coating on it. It has a custom paint job, and when you measure the paint on it, it measures a lot thicker because a lot of times when they restore cars and they finally get to the point where they're going to paint it and it's in the paint booth, the painter knows it's going to get sanded because it's a cool car. They're going to try to get a show car finish on it, so they put extra paint on. So that's one of the reasons I like. By the way, thanks, Yancy. I'm going to keep that, Buck. That's our video guy, in case you didn't know. Okay, so that's something to understand as a paint thickness gauge. Now, you can buy these on Amazon for, I think, as cheap as like 30 bucks. The one I'm using is right around 150. They go up to the thousands. And the only thing I'd like to say about a paint thickness gauge is what I use it for is what I call a big picture indicator that helps me to make the go or no go. So it's going to help me to go, oh, that's really thin. I'm not going to compound it. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go that way. Or I go, wow, I got plenty of paint on here. I'm going to make the big picture indicator the decision to go. I'm going to go ahead and compound it to get the swirls and scratches out. So that's what I use it for. And this would go a little bit deeper because I covered this in my last class. You know, people do tend to get all caught up in the gadgets. I do. But here's the thing. If you're going to use one, go around and just measure a few places on each of the major body panels to get an idea for what the paint thickness is. If you want to go elaborate, a lot of these paint thickness gauges will create a database you can download on your computer, and you can really get a good idea how much paint is on every square inch of every body panel. But the thing is you're not getting the car buffed out, so use it as a big picture indicator, make your decision about how aggressive or not aggressive you're going to go, and then get working on the car. Anyway, that's my take on it. And you got to keep in mind, I started detailing cars professionally in the 80s. Yeah, so a long time now, and almost the majority of all my work, I never had a paint in this gauge. Heck, I didn't even know what they were. And here's what I did instead. I used good abrasive technology, I used the right tool for the job, and good technique, and all my stuff comes out without a problem. So don't get too caught up in a paint thickness gauge. Okay, so we're going to do a test spot. So the first thing I do want to talk about is pads. Now in this video, we're going to be covering primarily foam pads. In a future video, we'll be covering microfiber pads and wool pads, but this one we're going to stick with foam. And I have the Buff and Shine line here, but there's a lot of quality brands of foam pads on the market. So just pick a brand and go with it. I do particularly like this brand, and I'll tell you why in a second. But you can see there's a color code here. We got got a light blue, a maroon, a medium blue, yellow, white, and black. I'm sad to say there is no universal color code system in the industry worldwide. Every pad manufacturer just comes up with their own color scheme. So the question I get all the time is how do I know what the pads are? Well, first of all, you go to the website and look at what the manufacturer shares. I mean, for this pad here, it's probably going to say soft foam finishing pad. There, I know what it is because I went to the website. You know, do your research. But if for some reason you have some pads, you have no idea what they are, here's how you can tell what they are. Just take your clean hand and feel the surface. A foam finishing pad will be very soft. And then let me go to the extreme opposite. Here's a very aggressive foam cutting pad. And when I feel it, it's sharp. It's got a sharpness to it. It's also denser, okay? It's harder to squish. So there's two ways besides even looking at the back where it says blue heavy cut. So there's all different ways to find out what the pad is, and it's kind of up to you to figure that out. But I just wanted to share that when you feel it, you can feel the sharpness or no sharpness. And as I went through these, like this has no real cut. This is a white polishing finishing pad. This is a yellow polishing pad. I could feel a little bit of cut there, not a lot. And then as I get to the blueberry, a little bit more, the maroon, all of a sudden it starts getting sharp. So there are varying grades. And just to kind of throw this out there, you know, a lot of people think foam is foam, but what you don't know is the people that make the foam add chemicals to it to make it do things. It's not just foam like you get in your camera case. There's chemicals in there for the polishing world to make it do different types of things. So there is a science to making foam pads. Now, so we've covered the pads. Now we're going to cover tools. Now in the last video, I shared with you a tool, and this was because we're targeting this video at beginners, people that have maybe never polished out a car in their life. And so if you've never done this, I mean, there's a lot of great tools. I got $50,000 of the tools back there. Some are as high as $800 and $900. But if you're new to it, you might want to start out with just an entry-level tool. See if you even like this. You might buff out the hood and go, I'll just let it go, or I'll take it to a detailer, or I don't care. And if you do like it, then after watching this video, I'm going to show you some tools that cost more but work better. But let's go ahead and we'll start out with this entry-level tool, and then we'll do our test spot. Now, the first thing I also want to cover is look at the backing plate size on this. Let me put this in order. You read left to right. So this is a 6-inch backing plate. This is what this tool comes with. It's a 6-inch backing plate. I have put a 5-inch on a similar tool. It's the same exact tool. They change body styles and logos, but this is a Bauer 8mm free spinning random orbital polisher. And in a previous video we made on this tool, I highly recommended to go ahead and after you buy this tool, take that backing plate off, and go up to Amazon. This is a Castleman. Can you get in there and see that? I'm sharing this because people send me messages. Mike, what's that backing plate? So go to Amazon, type in Castleman. You can find 2 of these for $10. And yeah, they're not high quality. They're cheap, but you get what you pay for. But it's really probably one of the least important when at least comes to this tool. But let me show you why I recommend going to the smaller backing plate. Here is a 5-inch pad, and here's a 6-inch pad. Look how much more surface area there is for that tiny little tool to try to rotate and oscillate. So by putting a smaller backing plate on there, you'll get better performance out of the tool, especially if you're experiencing pad stalling, just because you got less surface area that you have to try to rotate and oscillate. Okay, now, this tool in that video, we ran into some stalling problems. So I got some other tools here, and I'm going to show you how to overcome pad stalling in multiple different ways. But let's just go ahead and we'll start out with this. And if you remember what I said you want to start right in the middle for your test spot. So this is a foam polishing. It's not cutting, it's not finishing, it's right in that sweet spot we talked about. And in the Dr. Beasley's line, we have the Core Cut Plus, which most people should never be using. It cuts so fast. We got the Core Cut. This is like our compound, cuts really fast. Then we got the NSP 150, the NSP 95, 45, and the Z1. What these numbers mean is the diameter of the abrasive particle. So we use abrasive technology that is exclusive to Dr. Beasley's in the United States. It's called microspheres. Here I have some back here. A lot of people don't know what I say when I say abrasive technology, so let me help you to understand. Here's the Core Cut, 1.5 microns. and I'll take some out of here and just kind of show it to you. That is what we talk about when we say use abrasive technology. There's some sort of, in the industry, a chemist would refer to it as powders or grains, okay? I just call it abrasive technology. But that's what it looks like before it's turned into a product. And then because someone in the last video says, well, what makes your products different from everybody else? Well, our products are 100% inorganic. That means they're not made of anything that grows out of the ground or grew out of the ground at one time. This is our nano gel. It's 100% inorganic. So this is what you put the abrasives in, and you create one of these products that you would see over here. And then the benefit to the nano gel is because it's 100% inorganic, that after you use it, you can go right to the ceramic coating. With pretty much, I think, every other product on the market, including the ones that say primer, because that's how we describe ours as a primer, because it primes the paint for the coating, they're made with mineral oils, petroleum distillates, things like that that are organic, and you need to use a panel wipe like isopropyl alcohol or mineral spirits to wipe those oils off so the coating can actually bond to the paint. So I'm not a big sales guy on product, but I did want to cover that up because there's quite a few questions about that in the last video. Okay, so we talked about our tool, we talked about pad choice, and for this, I'm going to go with the NSP 150. In my estimation, this would be the closest thing to the average polish on the market today. Here's another technique. Here's a Sharpie marker, and let me show you a real important thing you can do no matter what brand of polisher you're using. As you can see, I've already taken and put in a black mark on the backing plate, and I'm going to put one on the pad, but here's why. If that black mark wasn't there when I turn this thing on, the yellow backing plate, the yellow pad are just a blur of yellow. It's really hard for me to tell if the pad's rotating and oscillating or if it's just vibrating or stalling out. So this is a real way to make a quick visual indicator. Mark the backing plate and the pad, or just mark one or the other. So just like this, and then I think you'll be able to see when I start polishing what I mean by that. Okay, so we marked that, and we're going to do our test spot. With NSP 150, I put it up here already. So when you're doing your test spot, you want to pick a panel. The best panel is a panel you can look down on. I see some guys doing it on the side of a fender. I've done that too. That works too. But in most cases, it's the horizontal panels. So the trunk, the roof, and the hood that tend to take the most damage from Mother Nature. They take the brunt of the damage, and even from us when we're washing it, and things like that. So that means it'll have the worst defects. So if you dial in a process that fixes one of the horizontal panels, chances are good it's also going to fix the vertical panels. If you do a test spot that fixes the vertical panels and they're not as bad shape, then you do the horizontal panels, you might go, oh, this isn't working. It worked good on the door, it's not working on the hood. So always do your test spot on a horizontal panel that you can look down on. That's why I'm not doing it up here on the roof. I can't really look down on that. And then normally when you detail a car, and I teach this in all my classes, you need to have what's called a best practice. You need to have a method to the madness. And when you're buffing out these larger panels, you don't start buffing here and then work your way out to the center at some point. You start in the center and work your way out. Then I'd move down and start in the center and work my way out. I might come to the front, start here to work my way down. But you don't start on the outside of the car and go to the inside. You start on the inside of the car or the panel and work to the outer edges. But for the test spot, I'm just going to do my first one right here. Oh, let's see, here it is. I forgot. I put it on the windshield wiper. So this is the NSP 150. And to start out, whether you're using a microfiber pad, a micro wool pad, or in this case, a foam pad, because the pad's dry, I kind of like to add, a lot of guys talk about pea-sized drops. I like to add dime-sized drops, okay? And, there is the topic of a pad priming, pushing this all over the place, and you can do that. The idea being is, once you put the abrasive technology over the entire face of the pad, when you turn the tool on, 100% of the pad goes to work for you. But in my older age, I'm getting lazy, so I just let the product migrate around on its own, but however you want to do. I will say, if you're going to get into microfiber pads, it is important to go ahead and prime your pad, and the idea being is to coat each individual fiber, or most of them, with the abrasive technology, just so you have uniform cutting, better pad rotation, better pad oscillation. So priming a pad for microfiber, very important. With foam, just less important. Look, all my cars come out looking good, and I don't prime pads, so figure that one out. Okay, cord over shoulder, and this is an important technique, just so you don't sit here and drag this up and down the side of some dude's car or your own car. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of section passes. And let's talk about section passes. You know, you've got thin panels. Where's the fender there? The top of the fender, there's a thin panel there. You're not going to do a crosshatch pattern on a thin panel. You're going to run the polisher the direction of the length of the panel. This just makes common sense. But anytime you can crosshatch, you should crosshatch. And that's for what's called UMR, Uniform Material Removal. You'll remove just as many swirls here as you do there because you did a very consistent and equal polishing process. Now, real key when you're doing a test spot, and you can kind of determine how you want to do this, but you want to either count how many seconds you're polishing or count how many passes you're polishing and use what's called a slow arm speed. Arm speed is how fast you move the tool over the surface. You want to use a slow arm speed. So some people like to count seconds, but for me, I just can't do it. I can't sit here and go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, you know, 80 Mississippi, 90 Mississippi. So I just like to count my section passes. But whether you do time it by seconds or minutes or count your section passes, the really big picture point idea when you're starting your first test spot is underdo the amount of section passes you would think you would do, because if I did 8 section passes and I wipe off and all the scratches are gone, I never knew at what point they were gone. They might have been gone after the first section pass because the paint's soft. But if you overdo your section passes, there's no way to know. So underdo it for your test spot. So in this case, I'll just go, this paint's really bad, and I have no idea if the paint is hard or soft, but I'm just going to do 4 textbook example section passes, then we'll wipe off and inspect, and then we'll go from there. And the other thing I just want to point out, and I teach this to people all the time, you can believe me or not, but when you're by yourself, if you dial in a process that say you're going to do 8 section passes to every section to get the defects out to your satisfaction, I count them out loud. Otherwise, I forget where I'm at, and then I do more passes to make up for the ones I don't know that I didn't do, and I spend another hour buffing out the car. You save an hour easy by doing this technique. So here we go. And speed settings. So someone asked me about speed setting. This has a dial. Most of these tools go from 1 to 6. This is on the 1. You know, I would never use the 1 for anything. If I was going to do some machine damp sanding with this, I'd probably be on at least a 3 or 4. But to spread your product out, if you're new to this, here's a good idea. Is put it on a medium speed setting like 4. Turn the polisher on. Spread your product out. Spread your product out, and this kind of maps out in your mind's eye the size of the section you're going to do. And for, you know, this is what I would call a wimpy tool. For a wimpy tool, you're going to do a section about the size of a microfiber towel. And that means when you buff out the car, you would start in the center and go here, then you might go here, then you might come to here, then go to here. But each time you're going to do that size, the size of a towel, and you're going to overlap a little bit into the previous section for UMR, Uniform Material Removal. Okay, now as you look on here, what you see, can you bring this camera down and show that? This is what I call a uniform layer of 2 things. You have abrasive technology and lubrication. Okay, the lubrication in our case is the nanogel. It's the thing the abrasives are embodied in, and it takes both to create beauty. Okay, if I threw a handful of sand on here with some water, it'd probably remove the swirls and scratches, but it wouldn't look very good because that's not a very good abrasive and it's a horrible lubrication. Okay, so then once you do that, I'm going to take and I'm going to turn the speed all the way up to 6 on this tool. I'm going to monitor for good pad rotation. If I don't see the pad rotating, I will check to see if I'm holding the pad flat to the surface. A lot of times I see people buffing like this. They push down on the back of the tool. There's an air gap in here, and only the back of the pad's working, and it ain't going to rotate very well. So you want to keep that pad flat, and that means you put all the pressure up here. You could actually put your hand under the tool, which would keep you from pushing down on it. You could pull down on it, but it's just a technique to teach yourself to keep all the pressure up here and keep that pad flat to the surface. And then, of course, I will use a slow speed, arm speed. So here we go. One. Two. Three. Okay, there was 4 textbook examples of a 4-section pass. That's a textbook example of 4-section passes. Slow arm speed, I did a crosshatch pattern, and I overlapped by 50%, okay? And first of all, just real quickly, there's just white product on here, which tells me we are, in fact, working on a clear coat. Had this been a single-stage paint job, which it could happen, someone could repaint this Mustang and use single-stage urethane or lacquer enamel, I would have pulled pigment off. The pad would have turned black. So real quickly, all my towels are already pre-inspected. I use tweezers for that. When they come out of the dryer, I feel them, I look at them, I make sure there's nothing on them that could put a scratch in paint. And then I love these towels. I get these at Auto Fiber. They're sold as a glass towel, but they have a loop, kind of like a bath towel. A bath towel, when you go to get out of the shower and dry off, they have a loop. It's called the nap. And how that works with this towel versus a towel with just open fingers, they're split open, open-ended fingers, is when you push this against the product, that loop, how can I make a loop? That loop tends to slice into the film, breaking it up, making it easier for you and me to wipe off. But then some people will say, well, Mike, that has an edge. Aren't you going to scratch the paint because it's got this silk edge? Well, I don't do stupid stuff. I don't rub the paint with the edge. So look at your hand. Here's your index finger. This is your clamp. After you fold it 4 ways, clamp the edges, lay your towel down flat, spread your fingers out, kind of scrunch it up. Now you've got really good towel control. Doesn't really matter on the horizontal surface, but on the verticals it does, because you don't want to get your towels on the floor where they get contaminated and put scratches in paint. Then just come down and use an overlapping circular motion and wipe off the residue. Okay. Now, camera guy, can you see the difference between that stuff, or do you need the light? Okay, so let's bring a light in here. So we'll start out. By the way, this car has a lot of rock chips, so we're planning to bring it back. Am I getting it for you? Then we'll go forward. We're planning to bring it back and do a video on how to do rock chip repair. Okay, so let me tell you what I see. Compared to over here, 1 billion times better. And it's a very nice dark finish. I do see some micro marring. Okay, so what that tells me is this paint's probably pretty soft because I'm using a polish and a polishing pad, and even the pad can leave its own scratch pattern. So to finish a black car out or any color car out perfectly, if you are seeing micro marring, that means you need to switch to a less aggressive product and a less aggressive pad for the final step. Anyway, so when I look at this, you know what? It does look good. There's still some deeper scratches here and there. I mean, this thing, again, was used as a hockey puck. So I'm going to go ahead and do a second test spot, and I'm gonna increase the level of cut. So I'm gonna go with the blueberry in the Buff and Shine line. This is called heavy polishing, so it's a little more aggressive than just polishing, which is what I had on the polisher. Okay, so we'll pull this off. Now at this point, I could just stick with the NSP 150, but the guy that let us borrow this car, I also did commit to him to do a really good job. So I'm going to cut this thing hard and really try to put the best finish that this paint can take back on it. But here's our core cut. And this is a very sharp abrasive technology. So back to our dime size, because it's a brand new pad. Once the pad kind of breaks in, then I would start using pea-sized drops. Now, instead of doing the test spot here, I'm going to move over. In fact, I think, can you capture if I do it up here? So I'm going to go up here and just kind of get out in the middle here. Okay, and again, couple techniques I didn't cover a second ago. Before you turn the polisher on, make sure it's in contact with the paint. Otherwise, you're going to throw splatter everywhere. Okay, I'm going to turn it down to the 4 just to spread my product out. Okay, that's not including the section passes. That's just getting it spread out so I have a uniform layer of abrasive technology and lubrication. Now I'm going to do, I think I'll just do 2 section passes and we'll lift off and see how that looks. Okay, 2 textbook examples of a section pass. I didn't count those ones out loud, I usually do. Let's check out what 2 passes will do. Oh yeah, and when you're wiping off, you want to take just little bites at a time, using an overlapping circular pattern. And in most cases, when you use that technique, everything will wipe off nice and easy. Okay, so now let's. When I look at it, you know what? It's a lot of the deeper scratches are gone. But let's go ahead and throw the swirl finder light. I still see a few deeper scratches in there. Am I good? Okay. Here's the second test spot. Better defect removal just by changing the pad to something more aggressive and also changing the abrasive technology to something more aggressive. Now, when we talk about, is that good enough? Well, that's a great question. And one of the things you got to do, you got to take into context what the car is, how it's going to be treated when you're done detailing it, whether it's yours or you're a professional doing it for someone else. And that will kind of let you know just how far am I going to chase these scratches, okay? This thing has a lot of deep scratches in random places. And because we measured the paint, and the paint's measuring anywhere between a high of 3.8 mils to a high of 4.8 mils, you know, with a mil in there difference. That's, to me, that's thin paint. I don't want to get too aggressive with this because I haven't checked with the owner, but to my knowledge, this thing sits outside all the time. So trying to get every single scratch out of this car would mean removing a lot of the already precious thin clear coat that's on it. And it's already 2025. This is a 2018. So it's 7 years old. You know, it's getting close to 8 years old. So I want to take that all into context and go, you know what? I want to get pretty good, but I'm not going to look for perfect. And here's how I would normally do that for a car like this. You just saw me do 2 section passes with core cut and a heavy polishing foam pad on a simple DA. And I removed, you know, easily 90-95% of the defects. I would call that good. I would say, hey, that's what we're going to get. You know, if the owner says, well, I want it perfect, I would try to educate him, and I'd say, look, you know, the guy's name is Brian. Look, Brian, you know, when you brought it to me, it's pretty jacked up. So I don't know if you bought this new or used, but whoever's owned this car, they have not been taking care of it very well. You know, so for me to go in and make it perfect, just to go back into the world it came from and get scratched up would just be a waste of time. So keep those kinds of things in context when you determine just how perfect you want to chase. And the other thing is anytime I detail a car for somebody else, the first question I ask them, and the first question you should ask them, is, how do you wash the car? That will tell you everything they know about take care of the paint on their car. If they say, well, you know, right down the road for me is a swirl-o-matic car wash, automatic car wash, that's where I take it because it's convenient, I would even try to get it this good, because as soon as he takes it to the car wash one time, he's going to start putting scratches in. Now, if Brian says, well, you know what? After you get it done, I love this car. I'm going to wash it carefully like that video you show on how to wash a black car, and try to keep it as nice as I can and hopefully never have to see you again. So knowing how somebody washes a car will help me to determine how far I want to go as far as the paint correction, and also whether I'm going to use a wax or a ceramic coating or a synthetic paint sealant. So I always ask my customer, how do you wash the car? And it's always fun to actually hear them describe what they do. So you saw me inspecting the after results using what's called an inspection light, or some people call it a swirl finder light. This is the Scan Grip brand. I think they're one of the early innovators in the marketplace. I think most people would agree they have the best inspection lights. They're also the most expensive. So whatever works for you, I just like my Scan Grip. But let me give you a couple tips and techniques on how to correctly use it. Now, I had a class this last weekend, had 16 people here. 13 people flew here from out of state, including 3 from California. And then we detailed 8 cars, including sanding 2 of them. So we're talking about an intense class. And of course, I showed them how to use an inspection light. And even after showing them, I had people doing this. Can anybody say tell me what's wrong with this? Pull that light up. You want to put it about 1.5 feet off the paint, and you want to angle it at a 45-degree angle to your eyes, so you can correctly see what's going on with the paint. When you put it down really low like this, all it really does is blow out the paint. You don't really see what's going on, especially in any of the surrounding areas. So you want to hold it about 1.5 feet off the paint, hold it so it's at it bounces the light to your eyes at a 45-degree angle, and that's how you use one of these inspection lights. Real handy. And another thing you can do is, you know, this video is kind of just targeted for people that are brand new to polishing, whether you're an enthusiast or professional. But I always teach people that if you're doing this for money and you're talking to a customer, it just kind of helps if you can show them cool gadgetry things like the swirl finder light, because they've probably never seen one, and it just helps them to trust that you actually know what you're doing. Because you know about the things they don't know about. They've probably never seen one. Okay, so we dialed in our test spot, and we found out that with just 2 section passes with our core cut, we left this paint looking pretty flawless. So what I want to do is, for me, 2 section passes, I think I could probably pull out more by doing 4. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 more, and then we're going to start talking about pad stalling. Well, I'm going to do the second step, because remember I said this paint is soft. In fact, let's talk about hard and soft paint. The fact that I was able to pull 95% of the defects out using 2 passes with a polishing pad and a compound tells me that the paint's pretty soft. If it was hard, I'd had to make 8, 9, 10, or get a more powerful pad tool, more powerful pad. So that tells me this paint on this thing is soft, but also I saw some micro marring, okay? And a lot of times that can be left by the sharpness of the pad. And that tells me that in order to get this thing perfect, I can't just do one step with a heavy paint correction step to remove the majority of the defects and stop. I need to do that step and then come back with something less aggressive to make sure the paint's perfect in the sun. So to do this, let me do 2 more steps with this. So that would be a total of 4 section passes. And when I'm doing that, I want to talk about how much hand pressure to put down. Okay, so now you can see the pad's kind of broken in. You can see the NSP is migrated around the pad. It's actually, it's not wet, but it's damp with product, and that's kind of what you want. And now I've put on 3 pea-sized drops. Okay, so let me do 2 more solid section passes. I'll count these out loud. But before I start, let me talk about how much pressure to put down. Okay, so you don't want to just use the weight of the tool. What happens when you do that is the pad kind of flutters. It's not very smooth. You're not going to do anything. So we know we need to add at least some pressure, but you don't want to add so much pressure that you're denting the sheet metal or bogging the tool down. So a good way to use this tool is to just add about 5 pounds of pressure. Now, this tool weighs about, I think, 6 pounds. So lift it up and feel it, and then try to duplicate that with your hand. About 20 years ago, I wrote an article showing how to gauge pressure. And what I did is I took a bathroom scale, I put a piece of clear plastic over it so I wouldn't get polish on it. And then I actually put polish on the pad and put my hand on it. It was a Porter cable. And I pressed down to show 5, 10, 15, and 20 pounds. And then I just encouraged everybody else, if you really want to learn how much pressure to put on the head of a tool, do that same thing. Get a bathroom scale, put your pad and your tool on there, and then apply pressure till you see that scale move in the direction you want to see it move, and get a feel for what about 5 pound feels like. It's not super rocket science. The point is you want to add some pressure, some light pressure. And then my arm speed was slow. And what was the other thing I wanted to cover? Oh, the tool speed. A lot of people are worried if this is your first time about burning through the paint. And when you talk about burning through the paint, what that means is, in the case of this car, this has got a base coat, clear coat finish. So when this car was built, they put on what's an E-coat, or I think it's called an electric coat. I forget what that's for. Then they put the primer on, and then the E-coat may have to do something with rust proofing it. Then they put the primer on, then they put the base coat, that's the color you see, and then they put a layer of clear paint. And a lot of people think clear coats aren't paint. They're paint without pigment. So if you're working on clear coat, you're still working on paint. It's just clear paint. Just keep that in mind. You know, whether it's base coat, clear coat, or single stage, it's all paint. Okay. So now when we talk about burn through the paint, in the context of this car, what that means is you would take off so much clear layer that you would turn your pad over and see the black coming off. That's a really bad sign. You don't want to see that. And a lot of times when I'm doing custom work, like I actually stand down and cut and buff a lot of cool cars like this every year, like 4 or 5 a year. And one of the things I always show when I'm shooting a video of pictures is that whatever the color of the car is, you don't see it on my wool pad or my foam pad when I'm done. That's the goal. Do the whole thing without ever striking through or burning through the paint. But here's the thing. These tools are really safe. I showed this in the last video. I'm going to pump this down to the 4 setting, and you know, I understand you're scared, but here's a couple things. One is don't ever buff on top of raised body lines or edges. So there's this inset here where there's a fresh air intake, and right here where this plane meets this plane, there's a raised body line. With the raised body line, a lot of times the paint may be thinner for a couple of reasons. First, when they painted it, because it's a high point, gravity causes the paint to flow downward, so the high points can be thinner just naturally from the painting process. But the other reason it could be thinner is through normal wear and tear. Maybe this car is washed 1,000 times. There's some kind of wear taking place there. But another reason why is because if this car's ever been buffed out for somebody before me, and I don't know what they used, maybe they used what I call a caveman compound. That means crap for abrasive technology. Call it rocks in the bottles. Maybe they used a wool pad like this. So nothing wrong with this. I'm going to show how to use this on this car, but here's a wool pad on a rotary. But they use that in conjunction with a real junky compound, and the effect is they remove the swirls and scratches, but all the raised body lines and all the edges, they left the paint thinner. You come along using all good stuff with good technique, make one pass, and you go through, because the other guy left it, as I like to say, whisper thin, very thin. So was it your fault? It's his fault, but guess who's going to take the hit? You are. So that's why I tell people when it comes to an edge, buff next to it, but don't put that polisher right on top and buff on it, okay? You know, it's just ridiculous. Just get close to it. No one's going to come around to your car and go, well, you know, Mike, you really did a good job. But right here by the edge, I still see a few swirls. You know, let him buff out the car next time. So just try to bring some common sense to it. Okay, so downward pressure about 5 pounds for these wimpy kinds of tools. Seriously, you really want to be on the 6 speed. What you want to do is when you turn it on is you want to see good pad rotation and good pad oscillation. You want to see both, not just one. I see a lot of people always talking about, I don't see no rotation. Well, I want rotation, but I also want oscillation. That's the function of this tool. DA polisher, dual action polisher, 2 actions. Okay, so now I've marked this. Now I'm just going to put down 5 pounds of pressure. I bump this all the way up to the 6. And when you're first starting out, it's completely fine if you want to put it on 3. There's 3. I still got some pad rotation. Okay. And just get a feel for the tool, get a feel for the sound, get a feel for the vibration, get a feel for it. But as your comfort level comes up, you're just going to find you're going to be faster overall and more efficient if you bring it up to a higher speed. I will, out of respect to my friends at Rupes, they design all their tools to be run on the 4-speed setting. And then if you run into a concave curve or an issue with pad sliding because you're on a thin panel or something intricate, then bump it up to 5 or 6 to power through that difficult area, but then back down to the 4. But when I'm using tools like this from Harbor Freight, I just put it on the 6 and just kind of set it and forget it. In fact, some tools I'll even tape the speed setting on at the highest speed setting so I don't actually bump it and bump it down because I want to get done at some point. Okay, let's go ahead and do our other 2 section passes. That would be 3. Okay, that's a total of 4 section passes. No black paint. Remember, that's a good sign. Sit there and we'll wipe off. And then we're going to dial in the next step. This was just because I know I could get more defects out because I only did 2 in the first place. And that was just to teach you a lesson that when you're doing your test spot to underdo the amount of passes you do. So you know at one point, this paint's also kind of sticky. At one point the defects come out. So that is absolutely much better. So let's go to the next step. Now I need a process to come back and polish that to make sure all the micro markings are removed because this is soft paint. So for that, because it's soft, I think I'm going to be able to get away with this really soft foam finishing pad. In fact, it's so soft this morning before showing up to work, I put my makeup on with it. Yes, it's that soft. My wife uses one too. Okay, centered up. Here's a little tip for putting pads on. The edge guard is kind of different because it's got this plastic liner that runs around the diameter of the pad. Then you got the Velcro. And for this backing plate, it pretty much centers. But if you don't have a pad like this and it's just flat on the back, what I will usually do is as I get them closer, I will touch my thumb to the backing plate, okay? So now if I am, because I'm old and shaky, so if I am shaking, at least I'm shaking in unison, and then I will slowly bring it down, and I'm gonna look and look and look on both sides until I bring it down, and once I'm happy with it, I will go ahead and press it on and hope that Velcro just holds on for dear life. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I wanna test something fairly unaggressive. This is Z1, wrong product. This is our NSP45. Okay, what that means is the diameter of the microsphere is 0.45 microns. A human hair is about 90 microns, so it's half the diameter of a human hair. Okay, remember, since I'm first starting out, I'm going to go ahead and put 3 dime size drops on here. And then after I break this pad in, I'll switch over to pea size drops, just like that. Okay, and then for this, I will go ahead and make 4 to 5 solid section passes just to make sure I remove any micro marring. Okay. When you get your comfort level up, like I showed turning the speed down to spread your product out, but when you get really good at this, you just turn it on, spread your product out, and go. And that's what I'm going to do here. That's spread out. 5 pounds of pressure. Slow on speed. With the polisher off, I just want to say that again. I'm going to put down 5 pounds of downward pressure on the head of the tool. I'm going to use a slow arm speed. I'm going to do a crosshatch pattern. I'm going to hit this about 4 or 5 times. That was 1. Two. 3. 4. 5. There's 5 solid textbook examples of what a section pass should look like. I counted them out loud so I didn't get lost. And 2 things I just want to comment. Sometimes if you're new to this and you turn this up to the high speed, this or any tool, and you hear that high speed, you'll tend to want to match that sound with your arm speed, and you'll start doing this. Okay. That's called skimming. It's not doing anything. So always be conscious of that. If you find yourself going faster to try to match your arm speed with the tool speed, don't do that. And then the other thing is called buffer creep, okay? Even I do buffer creep, but what buffer creep is you start out doing, I mean, if you look at this, it's pretty much like I said, it's the size of a microfiber towel. And then of course I would do this one and then this one and then this one and this one. But buffer creep is when you start out with this nice little neat pattern, but every time you make a pass, you go a little further, and pretty soon you're doing half the hood, and none of the swirls are going to be gone because you just tackle too big of an area for this type of tool. So avoid buffer creep and avoid too fast of an arm speed trying to match your arm speed to the sound of the tool. And then one more thing. And I have guys I have gurus, like famous personalities in the detailing world that will 100% disagree with me, and that's okay. As long as they get the shiny, I don't care. But here's what they'll say. Keep the same amount of pressure all the way through the buffing cycle. And here's what I say. No, polishing paint is an art form. We bring the human elements of care and passion to what we're doing. And for that last pass or two, I'm going to bring my pressure up. This is not a grinding process. It's a beautifying process. So for the last step, I could even turn my speed down to 5. Like that. A little quicker arm speed, light pressure, couple of passes. And I can already tell you this paint's going to look flawless. Okay. Wow. That looks good. Brian's gonna like the new paint job on his car. I don't know if it'll help to show profile. There's nothing there to see, but let's go ahead and we'll start back here where what I call the ugly. Am I into the ugly, Yancey?
Yeah.
And I'll move back and show the beautiful.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. There you go. You're good.
That looks good. So to get this to where I'd want it to be, I'd be wanting to do at least 2 steps plus some way of ceramic coating it. And just to let you know, what if you had a car like this? I mean, this thing's, can you come down here and capture when I talk about, look at the scarring on here. Over here, this isn't smudges, this is scarring on the paint. Look at this scratch running this way. Here's one running this way.
Get the light.
And there's water spots everywhere. I mean, this paint is abused. That's why it makes such a great demo vehicle. This is what I call real world detailing. But let me just touch on the topic. What if you're doing this for money and your customer didn't want to pay for a 2-step paint correction process? Because see, if you're doing this for money, one of the first things you got to learn is, me and Rennie Doyle, we taught a class last year at Mobile Tech Expo. Having a hard time thinking of what I taught. It was my class. He was my guest instructor with it. It did a great job, by the way. But we talked about, if you're starting out a detailing business, a lot of young guys, or not even young guys, because I got a lot of guys that are quitting their career job. They take my class because they want to start a detailing business and they want to just nail it at the very beginning. They don't want to go through all the trial and error. So not just young guys, but even older guys. When you're first starting out, a lot of times in a business, you'll do show car detailing to every car that's brought to you, and you end up making $1 an hour. So if you're going to do this for business, you actually want to have at least 3 packages. You want to have a show car package for a car like that over there. Someone wants the best for their black Porsche. You want a mid-range package. That's someone that wants to fix it pretty good, but they don't need that extra step of whatever the heavy paint correction step is to get a paint job perfect. Or you should have a budget package. Now, a budget package is where you're going to wash it and clay it, and then you're going to use what's called an AIO, or an all-in-one. In the old days, we called it a cleaner wax. You can go find a product from Mothers and McGuire's called Mother's Cleaner Wax, okay? But I think when the phone was invented, people don't want to type out cleaner/wax, so they just type out AIO. So it's all in one. We have an amazing AIO. It's called Z1. And here's my point. If this is your car, so there's also, just let me touch on this. If you're doing this for money, you have different packages. You have your entry level, your mid-range, your high-end, or your show car package. If you're doing this as an enthusiast, owner detailed car, you don't have packages you charge for money, but substitute the word approach for the word package. So say you're an average person, you got 2 or 3 cars. Maybe your truck, which drives every day, sits outside, you just want to do 1 step. You're taking care of the paint. It's going to last longer with service side of the car, but you don't really want to do 3 steps to it. So that's a good place for a Z1, a big van, or even like a Sprinter van, a large SUV. But if you got that thing that's in the garage that's kind of cool, or the wife's car, maybe you want to do 2 or 3 steps. So just always consider that if you're, as a pro, you want to have different packages. As a do-it-yourselfer, you want to have different approaches. I'm not going to take every car I own and do a 3-step multiple process paint correction step to it, because they're just daily drivers. Make sense? Okay, so Z1. Okay, so now that I've dialed in my test spot, and we talked about inspection lights, we talked about how fast to move a polisher, how much pressure to put down. We marked the pad so you can tell if the pad is rotating or oscillating, or if it's stalling out. And then we didn't cover this. We want to talk about paint temperature. So I am sorry to say I forgot my thermometer. It's a infrared thermometer. You can get them down. You can get them anywhere. Get one at Harbor Freight, and you just kind of point it at the paint, and it'll give you a temperature reading. So a lot of times I don't have it with me. Here's what I use. Wherever I go, I take the human version. It's right there, it's my hand. Okay, so after buffing a section, if I want to know if it's too hot, I put my hand down on the surface and feel it. And a couple things. One, if I can put my hand down here and hold a conversation with you, it's not too hot. If I put my hand down and instantly my knee-jerk reaction is called the fight or flight reaction, I go, ow! And I want to move my hand away quickly because I might get burnt. That's too hot. Quit buffing in that area. Let it cool down a little bit, okay? But anyway, that's something, I mean, most of us have a couple hands or at least one hand, and it's called the fight or flight. It's called I have an article on this. It's called the fight or flight method of gauging surface temperature. So either go down and spend $30 and buy an infrared paint thickness or paint measuring tool, or the heat measuring tool, temperature measuring tool, or just use your hand and use common sense. You know, if it's getting too hot, because maybe you're trying to really work some scratches out, so you're buffing and buffing and buffing, but you might want to just go, you know what, I think I'm going to go buff right here for a few seconds and let that cool down. Okay, so we covered correct technique, test spot. Now let's talk about pad rotation, pad stalling, pad oscillation. So this Mustang has a fairly sharp concave curve here. And what I'm going to do is, in the last video, we talked a lot about pad stalling, but I didn't really show how to overcome pad stalling. So I'm going to do a deep dive on how to overcome pad stalling. So the first thing is look at your tool. At the beginning of this video, we talked about how this is just an entry-level tool. There's nothing right with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a $65 brand new. It's nothing I would ever use to buff out a car. But if I was just testing the waters and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to become a detailer or detail my own cars, I might spend $65 on this, you know, and see how I liked it. And if I did like it, then I can always get a better tool and give this to my son or give this to a friend. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put the blue pad back on, because that's the one we dialed in for this paint, for this softness of paint, and this level of defects. And defects not only can be myriads, you know, that means thousands, millions of swirls of scratches, but those defects could be deep or shallow. So if they're really deep, it might be soft paint, but you still got to work at it because they're so deep. You got to take a lot of paint off to level that surface. And it could be very hard with very shallow scratches that would clean up very easy. So that's why you really need to do that test spot. But we determined on this particular car, the Blueberry, they call this the Blueberry heavy polishing pad. It's called a 5-inch pad. It's actually 6-inch diameter, but Buff and Shine, they sell their pads by the diameter of the back, something a little different. That most pads go by the diameter of the front. So this is called a 5-inch pad. It fits a 5-inch backing plate, which does kind of make sense. Now let me show you what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think what's going to happen is I come from this plane up to here, up to this angle, which creates a concave curve. What's going to happen, maybe the camera could come down here and check this out. You're going to have unequal pressure on this side of the pad and on this side of the pad, and an air gap down here where there's no pressure. And it's that uneven pressure on the outer edges of the pad that causes the pad to stall. So then let me show you it's stalling, then let me show you how to overcome that so you can buff out the whole car no matter what the shape of the panel. Okay, so back over here, I think we were using, let me get rid of these. We dialed in core cut, didn't we? Z1, core cut. Okay, and this pad is broken in. You can see the product's migrated around. And at some point, I'm going to talk about how many pads does it take to buff out a car, and I'm going to tie that in with pad washers because there's a lot of confusion over to use a wet pad or a dry pad to buff out a car. And I'll give you my take and you can figure it out on your own. Okay, so notice I put that down. I didn't turn it on in the air and throw splatter everywhere, especially up here in this stupid honeycomb looking air intake. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on just kind of slow. Turn my product along. And we've actually got a concave curve here. Okay, there's a plane here and a plane here. Then we got the same plane here, then it goes to a plane up here. So there's two concave curves here. Now, if I just try to run this polisher back and forth, it's pretty easy to maintain pad rotation. If I try to crosshatch this, watch what's going to happen though. Pad solid, pad solid, pad solid. Good pad rotation, pad solid, pad solid. That's the problem people run into anytime they use what's called a free spinning random orbital polisher. When you have uneven pressure, usually caused by concave curves, thin panels, or intricate areas, you run into pad stalling. And basically the pad's just kind of jiggling. There are some that say, well, even though it's jiggling, it's still taking the swirls out. Well, maybe, but probably very slowly. What I want to do is I want to start and get done so I can go into the house, take a shower, and have dinner with my wife. You know, I want to spend a week doing a thing I could do in a day. So I want to see good pad oscillation and good pad rotation. But if this is the only tool you have and you're dealing with any kind of car that has this kind of curves, let me show you how you can overcome pad stalling. So instead of trying to do this crosshatch, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tackle this plane, so this curvature here, this raised up, all by itself. I'll cover this. I'll polish out this section. I'll polish out this section. This flat plane becomes a section. This flat plane is a section. This is its own section. And that would kind of look like this. So the big section's easy. Just hold the pad flat. Okay, good pad rotation. Now, go on edge. There you go. Good pad rotation. Over here. Good pad rotation. And notice how I'm holding the tool. I'm holding the tool in a way that I can't put too much pressure down on this, because if I do, I'm going to lose pad rotation, pad oscillation. So I use a lighter touch. I get it so I can kind of feel when I'm flat on that panel, but I can also visually see when that pad is flat on this plane, this section of this panel, it's also going to rotate very efficiently also. Anyway, so that's one way to tackle pad stalling using the tool that's already in your hand. Let me show you a couple other ways though, but it does mean buying a different tool. First of all, I showed this in the last video. This is the Griot's Garage 9mm. So it's the same basic tool as this. This is an 8mm, this is a 9, so 1mm bigger in orbit strokes. So the pad's going to spin in a circle. It's going to make a circle inside that circle. It's the diameter of the oscillating circle that they're measuring. And sometimes you can see that when I turn a polisher on. So let me just go to this. This has a 6-inch backing plate. So this is a 6-inch edge guard. You want to just come up here and capture that where it says blueberry and it actually says 6-inch. And again, that's because most pad companies sell theirs by the diameter of the face of the pad, not the back of the pad. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion there, because if you go buy some pads and go, oh crap, these don't fit, it's not my fault. Okay. A couple weeks ago, I made a dedicated video just on pad stalling. I showed 14 different tools on a curved hood. And one of the things I noticed, because I kind of revisited all those tools, was it jogged my memory as to how well this tool, for a free spinning tool, actually maintains pad rotation. It wasn't too bad at all. I still would never buff out a whole car with it. I would use a gear-driven orbital or a rotary and just be done with it. But again, if you're new and you're just starting out, I looked up the price of this. It's around $150, $160. So it's $100 more than that, but it is a very well-built tool and it is better at pad rotation. So let me see if I can drag a cord over here without unplugging it. Okay, just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. I threw product because it's uneven. Okay, so this one I want to break that in a little bit. You can see the product's migrated around. I'll bring my speed all the way up to the 6. Walk my butt. Okay, so here we are in that one plane. It maintains pad rotation fairly well. Now let's start going up the plane. Look at that. Really good. That is really good pad rotation, considering I'm on a plane at this angle and a plane at this angle, which means I got high pressure here, no pressure down in this curvature part. And still, watch it again. Hold on. Let's do this right. Apologies for a long video, but when I do a brain dump like this, you're going to get a lot of information in a single sitting. Okay, this will make it. This will also kind of drive the point home as to what I was saying. And of course, if you buy a polisher that has a black backing plate, you can always grab like a silver or a gold Sharpie marker and mark the backing plate that way, you know, and if you got some white touch-up paint, heck, I've even used whiteout for like fixing typing errors, you know, anything, a sticker, put a sticker on there, something to make it easy for your eyes to monitor, to see and monitor pad rotation, pad oscillation. Okay, now let's go in here, and with those black marks, I think you can see this tool does a better job of maintaining pad rotation even with a bigger pad. Okay, pretty easy right there. Let's go into the curve. Boom. No problem. No problem at all. Now let's hit this one. No problem. Okay, so the point of that is I kind of forgot what a nice tool this is, because I primarily use gear-driven orbitals and rotary polishers. But if you're new to the market and you buy this and you're buffing along and you're just going, gosh, that pad just keeps stalling out, I can't get my car buffed out. Maybe that's when you go, you know, I'm going to take Mike's advice. I'm going to spend an extra $100 and go get the Griot's Garage G9. They got a great warranty too, great tool. And if you really wanted to, even though this tool was meant to run with this backing plate, you actually can get a smaller backing plate and turn and churn, as I like to say, a smaller pad, which usually always helps when buffing out cars with that type of tool. Okay, so that's one way, just one way. That's two ways. First, I showed you how to hold the tool that you already own in a different way with no pressure on the head, and then just buff out the different planes as an individual section to buff out. Let me show you another way to do that, and that's using a gear-driven orbital polisher. So this is the Harbor Freight. Everybody calls it the Hercules. The Hercules is like a brand, like Pepsi's a brand, Ford is a brand. The Hercules is a division inside Harbor Freight, like Bauer. So you got the Bauer, here's the Bauer, that's a brand or a line, and then you got the Hercules. But what the true name of this is a forced rotation orbital polisher. Okay, it's a gear-driven forced rotation orbital polisher. And what that means, let me go ahead and throw a pad on here. I need a bigger workbench. Good attachment strength with that Velcro. Between Buff and Shine and Griot's Garage hook and loop, it's all kind of different. Okay, so I'm going to throw on the 6-inch here, and these come with a 5-inch backing plate, so they don't perfectly center inside the centering ring, so I just have to eye it up. Okay, there we go. Push on it. Make sure it's on there good. Okay, so let me show you the difference in case you didn't see the other video. This is called a free spinning random orbital polisher. It's really easy to tell. I can take my hand and just spin the pad freely. Free spinning random orbital polisher. If you hold it crooked, you're buffing curves, the pad will quit working. Let me just demonstrate that. Well, I did demonstrate. Let me show you. Free spinning, very safe. You can do this. Okay, a very safe tool. Hard to burn paint with something you can hold in the air by the pad itself. Now, this tool in comparison, let me show you this one. Oh, look, the pad doesn't freely spin. That's because, listen, it's gear driven. It's going to orbit like a free spinning tool, but there's nothing I can do that'll stop this from rotating and oscillating. I can go up on edge, I can buff a curved panel, anything, and it's gonna, as I like to say, it's gonna plow through the car as fast as humanly possible while keeping your quality high. So let me show you. Instead of buying the $150 Griot's Garage, and sorry to all my friends at Griot's Garage, I'm not trying to take a sell from you. You can pick these up for about $100. It is basically a copy of the original, the Flex Beast. Okay, so it's a knockoff of this tool. The price on this retails about $520. The price on this retails about $100. The difference is you go, oh, the same thing, I'll just spend less money. No, that has a 7-function microprocessor, much higher quality innards than something that costs $100. It's just common sense. One of the things that tool will do, and I'll demonstrate this, is if power's interrupted and you have it in lock position, it won't come back on until you release it from the lock position. That's a safety feature. This tool, if power goes off in the lock position, the power comes back on, this is going to go back to buffing. It's going to be dancing across the hood on you. Okay, so let me, I need to add just a little bit of lubrication here. I think we got enough cut down there, but again, there's two things you need when you're machine polishing paint: abrasive technology and lubrication. Okay, now let's do the same thing here. Let me break this in a little bit. Okay, when I come into this angle, it's just going to rotate and oscillate no matter what. So I can knock this panel out fast.
Look at it. I'll push on it. Okay? Nothing's going to stop that pad from rotating and oscillating.
It's also kind of nice if you're working a thin panel with a free spinning tool. If I just try to use a small section of the pad for like this A-pillar here, probably quit rotating and oscillating. If I bring this tool up here though,
perfect oscillation, perfect rotation.
So what I teach people in my classes is, you know, instead of coming to a difficult area to buff with a free spinning tool, get a gear driven polisher, and that way you can tackle any shape, design, or size of body panel with the tool already in your hand. That means you're not putting this one down, getting the tool, which is just taking more time. That's why I like the gear driven polisher. I can tackle any panel. And I'm going to show you some tips and techniques. I had some guy the other day go call me the gear driven guru. Well, I did write a book for the gear driven tools, and I've been teaching people how to use them since they were invented, and I'm pretty good with one. So let me share a couple tips and techniques with gear driven orbital polishers. But first, I'll get back to that. First, I was trying to show you different ways to tackle concave curves to avoid pad sawing. So one was to use the tool in your hand, but change your hand position and then just run the pad down the plane that you're trying to do the paint correction to. The other was to switch to a gear-driven orbital. The other was to switch to a better designed tool. So that means something in here about the counterweight, the spindle, the motor, whatever it is. Grillos did their homework and they created a free spinning polisher that's pretty good at handling concave curves. Here's another way to do that. This, my friends, is a rotary polisher. Okay? And instead of putting a big old wool pad like this on here, what I could do is just take and I'll start out with this. Here's a 2-inch backing plate. We'll put a 2-inch backing plate. I'll start out with just a 2-inch backing plate. Now, technically, anytime you use a rotary polisher, you're putting in a hologram scratch. There's some guys that don't believe it, but they probably don't got the kind of microscopes to go down and look at the surface level to see that having a pad spin in a circle across paint is leaving a scratch pattern, even if you can't see it. That's why I finish all my cars out with the DA. It removes the holograms. So here's a 2-inch backing plate with a 2-inch pad. I'll just take and put just one drop right in the center here, just like that. And now I've got this concave curve, so I'll come down.
And because this gear-driven tool, rotary's gear-driven, it doesn't care what the shape of the panel is. It's going to get in there and knock it out no matter what.
Okay, so that's another way to knock out concave panels. And you know what? You can pick up a used rotary for 20 or 30 bucks in your local nickel trader or auto trader or nickel ads on eBay. This one here costs around, I guess, between $600 and $800. But man, this is my favorite rotary. I do, by the way, you can buy the cordless set. Whoops. Extension cords everywhere. You can buy the cordless version of the Flex. I've had this one. I've used it 3 or 4 times and it's already quit working. So I have no idea. I've checked the battery. I've tried different batteries. The battery's fully charged. Try to jump start it, maybe just help it a little bit to get it going. Nothing keeps this thing going. So get what you pay for. So that's another way to tackle concave curve, is just switch the type of drive or motion the tool has and go to a gear-driven rotary. So then if you're thinking at all right now, you're probably saying, well, Mike, didn't you just say that a rotary can leave holograms? It does. After you've done the major paint correction, the swirls and scratches are gone. All that's left is the hologram, which is going to be very shallow. Now you can come back with your wimpy tool and just do a little finesse work to pull the hologram back.
Just like that.
So that solves that problem. Remove the holograms with the other polisher that you have. You just want to switch over to something that has 2 actions, not 1. Oscillating and rotating action. Okay, so let's recap. I showed you how to use the tool that you already own. I showed you how to use a more expensive tool that does a better job. I showed you how to use a rotary polisher. Always remember, Rotary's gear driven, no pad stalling, knocks out any shape or panel, and I showed you how to use a gear driven orbital. There is actually a couple other ways you can skin this cat. Where is my micro tools? Right here. Okay. These are two of my favorites. There are copies of these up on Amazon that you can get fairly cheap because these are fairly expensive. This is the Rupes Nano. I like these in long neck with the extension. This is the Flex Pixie, PXE 80. It's actually what it's called. And it's got the 3-inch extension. And with these types of tools, you can get smaller pads, obviously. And you can come down and do the same thing I just showed you, but now you just have less bulk where your eyes are trying to see. Here, I will put a little product down here. That's a lot for this pad, but there we go. So now look, I can knock out that concave area right there. And again, come back with my orbital and pull the holograms out. But that's the way I could get the first step, that heavy paint correction step, done using a micro tool like this. Or just to be fair, because I got friends that work for both Rupes and Flex. Here's the Flex Nano. I always put an angry face on mine, okay? The angry iBird, or bird. It's the Angry Bird. Isn't that a game you can play? Angry Birds? I'm not a gamer, but no. Same thing, see? I can knock out that concave area, no problem. Then just come back and pull my holograms out with an orbital. Now, these two tools do come with other drive units. Let me just talk about those really quickly. Where did I put them? Right back here. I didn't pull the Rupes out, but they have the same thing. So when you buy one of these micro tools, they come with what's called a rotary drive unit. And they come with a 12 millimeter drive unit, and they come with a 3 millimeter drive unit. Okay, so these two units here, these are free spinning random orbital drive units, okay? Just like the big tool with the big backing plate, same idea, they're free spinning. And the problem with these small drive units on either brand of these types of tools, and my guess is any brand of this type of tool, is going to be pad stalling and pad rotation. They really struggle to maintain good pad oscillation and good pad stalling. And it frustrates all of us. It frustrates me. And when I saw this one, I go, oh, that's so great. I have a small DA, but they just barely maintain pad rotation. So for the most part, I take mine, I put them into rotary mode. And for the most part, they don't go back unless I'm machine sanding. Let me show you that. Oh, what did I do with that? Oh, right here. Rupes doesn't do this yet, but Flex offers a 6 millimeter drive unit, which is perfect for machine sanding, whether you're doing headlights or leveling orange peel on a custom paint job. But you got to buy that separately. It's $45. By the way, the whole reason we have that is because I wrote a letter to the president of Flex when this tool first came out and said, I don't care if you give me a 5, 6, 7, or 8, but 3's too anemic. That means weak. It doesn't maintain pad rotation. And 12, the orbit stroke for a 12 millimeter tool that big means that when I use it to sand and I want to sand next to this edge, I either have to stay very far away, or as I get closer, I will sand on the edge. And what I teach in our sanding classes is you always got to remember, sanding removes paint, compounding removes paint, polishing removes a little paint. And if you sand the edges or the raised body lines and you go to compound it and polish it, at some point, you're probably going to turn your pad over and see the base coat because you're going to go through. So you don't want to sand on edges. So that's why I asked them to make a 6 millimeter, and now you can get one too. Anyway, so there's another way to handle concave curves. And there's actually one more way. It's the old school way. Let's see. It's very old school. I have it right here in my pocket. I'm not a very good comedian. Oh, here it is, a hand applicator. Okay, if you really had to get into a tight area, you could take your compound and, you know, you have two options. You have microfiber. Let me grab the other option. Actually, you got three. You got cotton. Cotton's pretty scratchy though. But here's a microfiber applicator. I think this is from Autofiber, and here's a foam applicator. So the difference is, if I want to be really gentle, I want to use foam. It has a uniform surface texture. As soon as we jump over to fiber, I have individual fibers that are going to be cutting the paint and possibly leaving marring, most likely by hand leaving marring. But I could always start with this and come back with foam and pull the marring out left by the fibers, and that would just look like this. So if you had no other way to work a concave curve, here's the way you could do it. And whenever you're doing this, you just want to make sure you're using plenty of lubrication, because, you know, you're rubbing a cloth over scratch sensitive paint. And then when you're done, you know, if you wanted to finish out nicer, get a less aggressive product, wipe off the old residue. That's a Z1. Let's go with a 150. I want 95. 95, this is like a fine cut polish. You could come back and then repolish that area by hand using something that has a uniform surface texture. Same idea, same principle applies to buffing pads for polishers. You have pads with a uniform surface texture and you have pads with fibers. Let me just show you that real quick. This is a foam buffing pad, uniform surface texture. Here's a traditional 8-inch wool pad. It's made up of millions and millions of little fibers. Each one of those fibers cuts the paint. That's why a fiber pad, be it this style or a microfiber pad for a DA, that's why a fiber pad will cut faster than a foam pad. It's because the fibers are a form of abrasive. And the problem with that is because they're a form of abrasive, you always risk leaving holograms behind with a wool pad and micromarring if you use an orbital. And since I'm on that topic, let's just talk about micromarring versus holograms. I see some people that will buff with an orbital polisher and they're seeing a pad haze pattern, the way they move the polisher, and they'll call that holograms. That is not holograms. We in the industry, we need to have specific definitions for words so we know what we're talking about. So if someone calls me up on the phone or sends me a text or an email and says, Mike, I'm trying to get the holograms out of my 1970 satellite, I know exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about somebody that took a wool pad on a rotary, maybe even a foam pad, and they're buffing out the car and they left holograms, and chances are those holograms could be fairly deep. If someone says, Mike, I'm pulling out holograms, and I say, what's your polisher? And they go, it's a Porter cable. I go, well, those aren't holograms. That you could call that tick marks, DA haze, micromarring, or pad haze, okay? So, but it's not holograms. It's a haze, it's a scratch pattern, but it's very distinct because of the action of the tool oscillating and rotating versus rotary, which is just rotating. And then if you really want to go deep, the difference between pad haze and micromarring with a gear driven versus a free spinning is, here's something I always type. Generally speaking, a free spinning random oral polisher will finish out nicer, more consistently over a wider spectrum of paints. That's a whole lot of words to say. If you're working on soft paint, probably ought to be finishing out with something like a Porter cable, Rupes Bigfoot 15, Griot's Garage G9, something that's a free spinning because they're less aggressive. They'll finish out nicer on soft paints. Conversely, the gear-driven orbitals like the Rupes Millet, Rennie Doyle's DB8, the Flex 3401, the Super Beast, the Sea Beast, and now the Hercules force rotation orbital polisher, because they're gear-driven, they have so much power, they will tend to leave pad haze or pad trails in the paint when finishing out on soft paint. So that's why, you know, sometimes people say to me, Mike, if you could only choose one tool, what would you choose? And I say, I don't live in that fantasy world. I live in a world where I can buy all the tools I want. And I wouldn't have one tool, but here's what I could do. If I could only have 3 tools, I'd pick a cordless rotary, I'd pick a gear-driven orbital, and I'd pick a short stroke free spinning random orbital. So like a flex rotary, cordless rotary, the Super Beast for a gear-driven 8mm, and something like the Porter cable for a free spinning. And I could tackle any car detailing project with one of those tools, including machine scrubbing vinyl tops, tires, machine sanding, pulling out sanding marks, you name it, I could do it all with those 3 tools. I couldn't do it with just 2, and definitely couldn't do it with just 1. Okay, so we talked about how to do a test spot. Do it in, if you got to do a second test spot, you got to move to different paint. You got to do it until you dial in a process that meets your expectations, and your expectations for some cars might not be 100% defect removal, might be just like 50%. But that's a variable that you can control. And then we talked about how to do the second step, because in this case, this paint was soft, and the first step was leaving a little bit of micromarring. So the second step eliminated 100%. So now I have a process I can use over the rest of the car, and I've got the confidence when I'm done, it's going to look good when I pull it out in the sun. So the next thing let's talk about is, I covered overcoming pad stalling with the different tools. Let's talk about, now that we've dialed in our test spot, let me just show you one more thing. So this is a reason I like a gear-driven polisher. I will grab the Harbor Freight to show you this. In the first demonstration I showed you there, I talked about doing a spot about the size of a microfiber towel. Okay, can't tackle too big of an area because it's kind of a weak tool. Rupes, in Converse, they would say, let me grab some, and this is a good rule of thumb, so that's why I like to share it. I got a lot of friends at Rupes. They say if you're using, say their Bigfoot 21, you would tackle a size 6 times the size of the pad. Well, the Bigfoot 21 takes a 7-inch pad. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is what they mean when they say 6 times the size of the pad for the tool that you're using. Not, I wouldn't use this for a tool with a pad this big. That is a little bit bigger than a microfiber towel. So however you want to divide your panels up. Plus, when you divide up panels, not only do you divide bigger panels into smaller sections, but you also want to use the natural body lines and things like trim pieces. They're going to help guide you as to how big of an area or how small of an area that you tackle at one time. Okay, so let me get these pads out of the way. Let me go just a little deeper on dividing larger panels into smaller panels, and then I'll show you what I mean, why I like a gear-driven orbital. Okay, so every car is different. Okay, so the people that make the design of a car try to give it some sex appeal or some airflow, whatever it might be, to make it unique, or otherwise all our cars would look the same. So when I look at a car, here's what I look at. I want to look for raised body lines. I know where my edges are at, trim, and difficult areas. So the first thing when I look at this is we'll cover this later. There's pebble texture plastic trim up here. It's called plastic cladding by the wiper arms. I'm going to cover that up because I don't want to stain it and clean it at the end of the day when I'm tired. But here is a raised body line, which is normal, going right down in the center of the hood. So that tells me where my center is. If you didn't have a raised body line, you can always look at the rear view mirror. There's center. Okay. And then this one panel here is fairly flat and runs all the way to the end of the hood. That's one big flat panel. So with a free spinning random orbital polisher, I'd probably divide that. Here's a section, here's a section. I'd probably squeeze a third section, at least 3 sections. And then the same thing on this side. Here's a section, here's a section, here's a section. Okay, so I divide that into at least 6 different sections. If I'm using a gear-driven orbital, I might tackle this all at one time. That's how much more power, correction power it has. But let me continue. So we come down here. This is like a mock-up. I popped the hood to see how hard it would be to take this off. Taking this piece of trim and any trim off, a lot of times it's easy, but there's a insulation mat covering it. And if I try to take that on, I'll destroy it. Then I got to buy him an insulation mat. If I could remove it, I would remove it. I can't, so I shan't. So I need to cover this up. But as looking at this panel, here's one big section. Here's a section if you just wanted to do this section. So here's raised body line to raised body line to edge to trim piece. So right here is a section. This is a section by itself, no matter which tool you're using. And this is some pretty critical edge work, which I'll show you later. Then when we come to the side of the fender, as already discussed, it's got this concave curve because of the way the body line was formed into the hood here. So if I'm using a free spinning tool, I might have to spend a lot of time just doing just this plane. Okay. And I would probably tackle about a third at a time. And usually when I do that, I usually make a few extra section passes. So let me just show you how I would do that. If you're working a thin plane like this, here's how I would tackle that with this tool. I'm going to get my pad rotation going, and then I'm going to make a series. Instead of crosshatch, I'm just going to go linear, but I would increase the number of passes I made because functionally I'm not getting as much paint correction by not doing a crosshatch pattern as I am a linear. So it would look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
8. There's 8 solid section passes, light pressure. I was able to maintain pad rotation and just a cursory look. It looks pretty good. I'd call that good. And then I tackle another section. Now, when I tackle this new section, I want to overlap a little bit, like an inch or two, into the previous section. So that would look like this. And just so no one calls me out for not using product, let me go ahead and put a little product on here. This was just kind of a demonstration, but I get everybody on social media as an expert nowadays. Okay, so I get that rotation. 1, 2, 3, 4. Gotta slow down. Even I try to go fast. 5, 6. 7. 8. Notice my hand position. I'm not putting pressure down here because this is going to cause pad stalling because that's a concave curve. I'm just working one side of the curve, but part of maintaining that pad rotation is just being conscious of how much you're pressing down on it. And actually, when we get up to this right here, so this panel curves like that, you actually got a plane here and a plane here, and right there you have a secondary concave curve. You have one this way and you have one this way. So I was getting more pad stalling going into here, but all you really got to do is just use some finesse. Just get in there, let the tool do its work, or use one of the other techniques I shared with you. And there actually is another technique. Since I talked about it, let me just go and mention it. This is a 3-inch backing pad. You can buy these for, this is a Lake Country. You can buy these from Buff and Shine, Lake Country. Go up to Amazon, probably find a no name. You can pull this backing plate off and put this 3-inch pad, and now you can turn and churn a smaller pad, which tends to be less affected by pad rotation. In fact, let me just show you that real quick because I'll show you the wrenches. When you buy your Harbor Freight tool, it's going to come with a wrench like this. This is actually 14 millimeter or 9/16, but look how thin it is. And that's important because you got to be able to get it back here through. And this is where this wrench is going, but you got to be careful because there's a counterweight in there. So you want to look first and make sure it's out of the way. If it's not, you can do something as simple as taking a pencil eraser on the back of a pencil and just kind of rub it and push it. When I pull this off, you'll see what I'm talking about. I've got the counterweight out of the way. So this will just slide in, grab the spindle. Now you'll see exactly, come off there, what I'm talking about. Here's the slot, here's the wrench, there's the spindle. That's how you hold it. But if the counterweight is in the way, you can't get this between the counterweight and the backing plate. And if you do, you'll probably wedge it in there and it'll be hard to get it out. So look back there, move the counterweight out of the way. And while this is apart, this is what's called the free floating spindle bearing assembly. And that's why these tools are free spinning random roll polishers, because that's not connected to a gear system. Okay, so then you could take, reverse that, and a lot of times these things come with a rubber nut and a compression washer. And don't lose the rubber nut, and put it back on the one you're taking off so you don't lose the compression washer, because a lot of times the compression washer will fall off. Okay, tip it over, it falls off, you don't see it. You put this on this tool, and these rivets here are going to hit that counterweight, and not only are you going to put metal particles all over the paint you're polishing, it's going to create a huge loud noise, and it's going to create a lot of heat and destroy your backing plate. So don't lose the compression washer. What I usually do is kind of hold it there with my thumb, bring it down, line it up, and of course with my other hand, that's the wrong wrench. This is a Porter cable wrench, and it may actually fit in there. Because if you lose this wrench, it's kind of, I haven't seen one for sale. And most of your 9/16 at your house, they're too thick. They won't get in there. I know some of you guys got a thin 9/16. I do too. There. Now, let's go back. Remember, we dialed in the blue pad for our first correction step. So here's a 3-inch edge guard. Let's see how it fits. Look at it. It fits perfectly into that 3-inch backing plate with that plastic liner. So it centers it up for you. Whew. Core cut. To be honest, I haven't tried this on a concave curve. That's because I don't use these kinds of tools. But let's just see what we can do here. Okay, so let me just kind of warm this up a little bit because pad's dry. Just move it around. You can see the lubrication and abrasives have kind of migrated around. All the way to the 6. That's all. Not a lot, but a little. But definitely a better option. So there's yet another way to overcome pad stalling. Switch backing plate, switch tool size. While I'm at it, I get about an email a week since that last video. We'll walk back here for a second. I get about an email a week or a comment in the comments section. And what someone will do is they will say, Mike, I bought the Bauer 20. This is kind of a mess because we just had a class about, look at all these tools in here. This is the Bauer 20 millimeter. So this is a copy of the Bigfoot 21. Here's the email. Hey, Mike, I saw your video putting a 3-inch backing plate on the little Bauer. Where can I buy one for this tool? And the answer is, you can't. Gotta buy another tool. You can get a 5-inch backing plate for this. Buy it from Rupes. It'll fit on there because this is a copy of Rupes. So the way the backing plate is designed and attaches to the spindle is the same as Rupes because it's a copy of Rupes. Same thing with Griot's Garage. You got the ShineMate, the Max Shine. You got the Zen. You got the chemical guys. I mean, everybody has a polisher out there nowadays, but for the most part, they're a copy of something that already exists. And if they're a true copy, some of the other accessory items for the real one will fit on the copy. And to that point, this is the Bauer, or not the Bauer, this is the Hercules gear-driven orbital. You can actually take and you can buy this 4-inch backing plate from Flex, and because this is a copy of the Flex Beast, that means the full-size backing plate and the little guy backing plate are interchangeable. This will bolt right on, and then this would allow you, instead of using the big pad like I like to use, if you're new to this, you might like a smaller pad. It will be easier to control, but this will hold the smaller pad. So there's another option for you. And if I remember we have time, I'll show you how all this works. Okay, but let me just share with you. So that was another way to do that. Let me just go ahead and share with you now one of the reasons I like a gear-driven polisher like this beast. And I don't recommend this to everybody. And I know some of the experts out there, you know, the leaders in the detailing world, they'll say, Mike, you're doing that wrong. All I know is my cars come out shiny, so. Okay, there's 3 pea-sized drops. Now what I'm gonna do is, look, I'm gonna brace my legs. And another reason you always do the horizontal surfaces is because for big hoods like this, you gotta lean on the car. And if you really wanna be a pro, you could do all the horizontal surfaces all the way through the process and then tackle the vertical panels. Because if I compound this and compound the car, and then I polish this, and I'm leaning on this when I compound it, I could be putting scratches in. And then when I go to coat it or put a wax on it, and I've already polished this, I could be putting scratches into the polish section. So if you really want to go nuts, you know, do things in a way that it won't matter if you lean on this or not, because this part's done. You're not going to have to lean on it again as you tackle the vertical panels. But here's what I do. I don't do that. I do it for some cars, but not every car. It has to be a real show car, usually black. So watch this. I'll turn the speed down a little bit. I've done this at a whole bunch of my classes in my life. Okay, so first, if you paid attention at all I'm really doing is putting a layer of 2 things, lubrication and abrasive technology. Now watch what you can do. One. 2. 3. 4. And then remember what I said for the last few passes, bring your pressure up. And that's especially true for a gear-driven polisher. Light pressure, light. I always like to finesse out my major body panels like the hood, the roof, trunk lid with a linear passion versus the side-to-side passion. I think most detailers agree, that's a fairly large section to tackle, and most of you probably shouldn't be doing that. I'm just saying, with a gear-driven polisher, you can. Okay, so you just saw how large of a section I tackled using a gear-driven orbital. And just for fun, let's just check out the before and after difference, you know. I would say that's a pretty big section. So let's see, here's before. I always like to show the ugly first. You see that? And then we'll come over here. Look at it. Okay, and of course, there's still some deeper scratches in here, but that's normal because this thing, remember, was used like a hockey puck. And I'm going to come back and show you how I would tackle, if I really wanted to tackle some of the deeper scratches, I'll show you a couple different ways to do that, but we'll do that later on. Just remind me, camera guy. Okay, so the next thing is, let's see, we want to talk about, I just kind of want to reiterate, if you're using a tool like this, any brand, but free spinning random orbital polisher, as compared to gear driven, okay, not free spinning, generally speaking, you're going to tackle a smaller area. You may not tackle an area this big. Okay, that's a big area. But my point was to kind of exaggerate a little bit to show you the difference between gear driven and free spinning. Smaller work area, bigger work area. And at the end of the day, at least for me, I can go a lot faster and tackle an entire car with a gear driven orbital than I can with a free spinning. And there's one more aspect before I forget. Let me just kind of bring this up. Remember how I talked about taking a Sharpie marker? What you guys can't see is all these extension cords back here. Remember I talked about taking a Sharpie marker and marking the side of the pad or the side of the backing plate. And that's to make it easier for your eyes to monitor, to see and to monitor pad rotation. And what that means is as you're buffing, if you're looking down and you just see that pad's jiggling, then you know, hey, I need to do something. I'm not getting the defects out in a time efficient manner here. And then you can adjust the way you hold it, go to a different tool. You know, I showed you 7 different ways, I think, to tackle concave curves where you run into pad stalling. But let's go deeper than that. If you mark the side of your backing plate, and now theoretically, say it's going to take me, let's just pick 6. Say it's going to take me 6 hours to do the first paint correction step to this body style. Doesn't that mean for 6 hours, I got to look and see, is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad rotating? Is the pad oscillating? Is the pad oscillating? The entire time. I call that brain drain. It just drains my brain. I got other things I want to think about, like how many section passes I did. And conversely, if you're using a gear-driven orbital, you don't need to mark your backing plate, you don't need to mark your pad, and you don't need to look and see if you got good pad oscillation and good pad rotation for the entire time you're buffing out the car. You can just focus on counting your section passes, or if you want to count seconds, count how many seconds you polished the paint. Okay, so that's kind of the huge big difference between gear-driven, random orbital, sections to buff. Oh, and by the way, when I was tackling that big section with this, I was probably pushing down 10 pounds of pressure. And here's why. When I've got paint in really bad shape and I need to remove a lot of paint quickly, you know, the heavy paint correction step, with a free spinning random orbital, it's really just about 5 pounds, light pressure. But with this one, because it's gear driven, so the pad's going to oscillate and rotate no matter what, I can actually push on it harder. And here's what that does. It engages the abrasives with the paint, to take little bites out of it. Think of an ice cream scoop. You scoop out the ice cream. That's what the abrasives are. They're scooping. They're taking little bites out. You're leveling that surface faster because you can, because nothing's going to stop this thing from rotating or oscillating. So you push harder so you can go faster. And well, Mike, won't that leave some pad marring? It might, but I'm doing 2 steps. It doesn't matter. I'll take it out in the next step. I just want to get through the first step as fast as I can. Okay, let's talk about edge work. Okay, so I think my longtime friend Jason Rose is really the guy that made the term edge work popular, and he puts a lot of emphasis on it, as he should. It's a difficult portion of the car to buff out, is getting all the edges. So I've got the Rupes Nano long neck, and the long neck, believe it or not, is only 1 inch longer, but I like it because it gives me some reach when I'm doing some meticulous type of intricate work. And this is the Flex PXE80. Here's the actual rotary drive unit right here. And then I bought this extension from, oh gosh, I'll have to think of the name. It's a guy, I think, up north that sells these. This is kind of cool. Spring-loaded collar. Makes it easy to change your drive units around, lock that into place. Okay, so edge work. Here's what I'm talking about, edge work. What I want you to do is, if you come down here and you look next to this piece of trim, see how all that paint is gray in there? See that? It's kind of got a whiteness to it. So there's no way I can safely get in there with the big pad. But with this is a Rupes yellow foam polishing pad. Let me show you what I can do with this. We'll take a little 150. Here's a little technique for you. I'm putting some product out there. I'm not going to buff there. That's for me to draw from. This is called finger painting. So I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to paint it along that edge that I want to polish out. Now I have 2 things there, lubrication and abrasive technology. Remember, this is a rotary, so it tends to want to throw splatter. Let me turn the speed down. This is kind of cool. It's got a little digital speed controller. I'll start out at the 1 because this pad's dry. I'm going to break my pad in. Okay, and I'm just going to leave myself, but here's what I can do. Look at, the Rupes did a good job. See how they've got this recessed so this will bend back, but I've got a nice little thin section of paint. So what that means is I can get in here like this, and just light pressure, just run it into that little 1/4 inch section of paint between that piece of plastic accent trim and the actual hood. And my guess is I'm going to be able to get rid of that oxidation that's taking place down there. Might have went faster if I got a more aggressive pad. I don't know why I grabbed that. Sometimes they just start doing things. Okay. Okay, now bring that camera down here. And boom, all that oxidation is gone right next to that edge. I didn't hurt the edge, I didn't hurt the paint. And of course, I need to come back with my big polisher and pull out any holograms in that area. Okay, here's another idea or example of edge work. First, I'm going to go ahead and this has this like honeycomb fake grill. And so what I want to do is, what I don't want to do is I don't want to come back with a toothbrush and try to get all the splatter out of there. So I'm just going to take some tape and tape this off. I am a huge fan of taping, and it's not because I'm not good at what I do. That's not the reason. The reason I'm a huge fan of taping is because I've been doing this for so long. I know myself. And here's what I know about myself. When I'm done with this, I don't want to be cleaning up splatter and residue and stains on everything. I want to go home, and I'm tired. It's one thing to try to do meticulous work like that if you're fresh, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be tired. So here's what I know. If I tape this off, I can just come back and rip the tape off and go home. I don't got to come back with a toothbrush and scrape everything. So it takes a few minutes to go around and tape off a car. And we're going to show you that. This thing has pebble textured black plastic trim everywhere. And it just makes it a real pain to polish, because you got to tape that stuff off or you'll be staying late and trying to get the stain out of the plastic trim. And because it's textured, you know, your polish splatter will go deep into it, and it's just a real pain. And can you pan over and look at that 70 Satellite? A lot of people think I like to work on old cars because they're old cars. So that's kind of true. I think the body style of things that came out of Detroit from the 30s to the 1970s, even all the way up to 79, the 79 Trans Am, the 79 Corvette. A lot of those cars are very iconic in their body styles. They're very beautiful. But if you notice, that one's got a lot of chrome trim on it. It's got no plastic trim. So in the class we had last weekend, I didn't teach the class to tape that off. I taught them to run the buffer over it, because that trim oxidizes just like a set of mag wheels will oxidize. And instead of taping off, run your polisher with a foam pad and a quality paint polish, and usually remove the oxidation and brighten it right up. Okay, so look at this. I've got this all covered up. Now I'm going to come back. I'm actually going to go ahead and go to a little more aggressive pad here. These are all Rupes pads. I also have a bunch from Buff and Shine and SPTA. So this is their teal pad. It's kind of in between a cutting pad and a polishing pad. Remember, I put some product here to draw from. So let me just kind of spread some around. And I've got a lot of complicated planes on this to buff out. Let me just show you. I just polished out this section, but there's actually a plane that runs in front of it. Then there's a plane that runs here. Here's a plane. The side has a plane. This is a plane, one big plane. There's just a little bit of a plane there. Then there's the side plane. So all this has little planes everywhere that you need to address, or otherwise the hood in the car will look real freaking good. Then you look at these trim pieces and they'll look horrible. Okay. And because this tool is lightweight and compact in size, it's really easy for me to control and guide it. And that's two things, not just one. It's control it, and part of guiding it is being able to control it. Okay, got that pretty good. Now I'm going to come down and get this side here. I think that's painted. It could be piano plastic, but I think it's painted with the same paint the car is. The reason I want to bring that up is because a lot of new cars have piano plastic on it. It's black piano plastic. And that plastic material is very soft. Okay, I'm going to get this inside sling here. Very soft. And if you buff in one place for too long, like an edge, you will burn through and you will expose white plastic. There's really no way to fix that outside of just replacing it. So most of the time that black piano plastic is very soft. That means it scratches easy. It also means it corrects very easy. And just keep that in mind if you're working on it. Okay, so, and then while I'm here, there's a tight, intricate area there. And actually all around here is just kind of intricate. So you might as well just nail it all at once. And that's one of the things I do when I get going with the tool. If I see areas I can knock out while I still have that tool in my hand, I just go ahead and knock them out. There's another application for that. I will try to find a way to show you that. Yeah, this really has a lot of white paint right next to the edge. And I'm going to take a guess why. It's really easy to clean and polish or do anything to a big flat area. It takes more time to do all the intricate stuff. So most people don't, and that's why you see this is turned white with oxidation. No one's ever given it any attention like they're getting with a 1-inch pad on a Rupes Nano right now. It's just a matter of taking your time though. Hold on, I need some more product to draw from. We did take a before video of this car, and sometime next week, we won't get the whole car done today. I'll probably finish it out tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday, at the time we're shooting this. And then I'll have Yancey come back, over the weekend or sometime next week and just do a walk around and show you the final results. There we go. And this white paint down here that you saw on the camera, it's not buffing out easy. I actually thought it'd come off pretty quick, but what I did was, if you watch, so I just took my time. I lit the abrasives, I let the pad do their thing, and now that section is done. So there's some intricate edge work technique for you. But of course, it all starts with buying the tool. I didn't get this flat spot right here. And you're a waste product. Okay. And this is actually just as swirled out and filled with water spots, just like the rest of the car. So again, if you don't fix something like this and fix everything around it, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. Okay, let me give this a final wipe just to get that off there. Then of course the question is, well, Mike, you said that a hologram, a rotary always leaves a hologram. How would you fix that? Well, with something like this, I would switch back over. So we cut that. Now we need to come back and polish it. So I think I dialed in using the black pad and NSP 45 Z1. Note to self: put the name of the product on the back of the bottle next time you shoot a video, so I can see what it is. Okay. Just kind of warming it up. Then I just come back and hit this. Light touch. Run it along the edge there. Anyway, that's how you would get rid of the holograms. The way I would do it in the real world is I wouldn't be messing around with the free spinning random orbital. I would grab my Beast, the original Beast. By the way, they've discontinued this. I talked to Flex yesterday. It is 100% guaranteed. The original Beast is discontinued. If you want one, you better get one. Well, the getting's good. Okay, so if you're watching me do that, you notice I had to really work at maintaining pad rotation to get these tight areas. And here's the place where there's two concave curves right in there. So instead I would do this. In fact, let me share a technique while I'm here. Because this is a gear-driven orbital, I can go up on edge, okay? And that makes it real easy to pull the holograms out of here, or just oxidation of swirls if you didn't have rotary, because the pad will maintain good rotation and good oscillation no matter what. It's gear-driven. But when I want to knock out these edges, I want to get some lubrication and some abrasive technology just on the edge. So there's a couple ways you can do that. Here's the slow way. Put some product out here to draw from. Take your finger and do this. You could also do this. I mean, either way. And I could slowly just kind of coat the outer edge, because I'm going to go up on edge big time with this thing. But here's how I do it and how I teach my class, is I put a strip of product down, not a lot, but a little bit, and then just slowly walk the edge into it at low speed, just slowly. And I'm getting the abrasives and I'm getting the lubrication on the edge of that pad. I can come back and grab some more later there. It's completely lubricated and full of abrasive. Now, come down here, and when I get into this concave curve here, there's a curve this way and a curve that way, I can nail that with no problem. Same thing on that little lip. Because I'm using good abrasive technology, it doesn't really take long to pull the holograms out. The paint's soft, but that's how I would do that. Gotta get this edge. See how I'm up on edge? It's in the air. And, you know, in seconds, I've just done show car work to a tight, intricate area using a couple different tools. Oh, it looks good. Brian, yummy dinner. It's the guy that owns it. Okay, that towel's wasted. New towel. New towel, right here. I just want to get into the edges here before I move on. Okay, and at this point, because I've actually knocked this section out, I could pull the tape off. I'll leave it on there till I'm done with the whole car though. Anyway, that's how you do edge work to intricate areas. I talked about this earlier, but let's just talk about when you would do crosshatch and when you would do a linear motion with your polisher. And this panel here is a good example. This is just a long, narrow, thin panel with a rolled edge here and a sharp edge right here. And this sharp edge is actually higher than this side. You can feel that with your hand. So the edge you would burn through first would be this front portion on that edge, not the hood, because the hood's down a little bit further. But just to kind of demonstrate what I mean, let me go back to our Wimpy tool, the beginner's tool, the Harbor Freight. And I get some product, that's the wrong product. A little bit of core cut, 95, 150. There we go, core cut. Okay, a couple. Okay. And now this gets kind of tricky because this pad is wider than this panel. So that means I'm going to be buffing on this edge or this edge, either way. And that's where you can get into problems. You can keep your pressure really light and just spend more time on it, but it's just a good habit to not buff on edges. Let's see if I can do this panel safely. Okay, once I got my product spread out, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to follow my pad edge against this raised edge, but tilt it a little bit so there's no pressure down here. So I went over that 2 solid section passes, and see this little bit of product that's right there? I never buffed that off because I never hit it with the spinning pad because I tilted it and I was able to maintain pad rotation. So let me do the same thing here on this side. Okay, 2 solid section passes. I did pick up most of it. There's still a little bit here, but the point is, you could probably see I was tilting it just a little bit. So most of the pad is flat to that panel, but there's no pressure on those edges. That's one way you can knock out a thinner panel with a larger pad if you don't have the other backing plate or smaller tools. And then some people, including myself, might say, well, Mike, if you're putting excess pressure on the pad crooked, won't you get some micromar in there? You might. So that's why I come back and I use the word schmoo. I'm going to schmoo this over by tilting the polisher. So right now this is 6 inches in diameter. If I tilt it, I get the diameter down to about 3 or 4 inches. Don't have 100% pad contact, but I'm not putting any pressure on the edges. So let me see if I can show you that one. So I'm going to tilt it. And that's what I mean. I kind of tied in the heavy correction I did here, the heavy correction I did here by doing some dedicated correction down the middle. I'm going to come back this way so I think you can see the pads in the air. Anyway, then let me show you how I would do that in the real world. In the real world, I wouldn't mess around with that tool. I would grab the Harbor Freight version of the Beast product. Just a little bit of product. I'm going to put that right in the center of the pad just to spread this out. Like that. Same idea, but because it's gear driven, I don't got to worry about pad rotation or oscillation. It's going to rotate and oscillate no matter what. And that would look like this. Can you see this in the air? Now I'll come back and hit this side. Now I'm going to tilt it so I shrink a 7-inch pad diameter down to about 3 or 4 inches and knock out the center. See that? And not only does that keep you safe by keeping the pressure off the thin portions of the paint, it gives it a more uniform look when you schmoo over the centerpiece after tackling the outer side or edges. So there's how you, and again, in this particular case, just because I kind of skipped over the topic, even with the smaller pad, I wouldn't try to go this direction and then this direction. It's just not going to work. So on thin linear panels, you just move the polisher in the direction of the length of the panel. You don't try to do this. You try to do that, you're buffing on the edge. One of these days, you're gonna have a problem. So don't do that. And to tell you the truth, even if I had a 2-inch pad on an orbital, I still wouldn't do this. I would just run it the length of the direction of the panel. I wrote an article years ago called "Let the Panel Be Your Guide." And in it, it has a picture of Yoda from Star Wars. And it says, in your best Yoda voice, look at the panel and then say, "Let the panel be your guide," or "Let the panel be your guide." See, not much of an impersonator either. Okay. That is a ton of technique. We covered free spinning, we covered gear driven, we covered rotary, we carried full-size tools, medium-size tools, micro tools. I taught you how to do your test spots in the various orders, and then when you finally get, and this was doing the test spot, but also showing you some techniques to overcome pad stalling and different things. But in the real world, say I just did my test spot and says, yep, that process works good. This is where I would jump up here and start working from the top down, and we're going to show you that next. But now that I've proven to myself that I can in fact fix this paint, now is the time I would go ahead and start taping off plastic trim. I don't do it till after I find out, because in my life I've come across 2 or 3 cars that just, no matter what you did, the paint was never going to get better. So why put tape on the plastic parts? Make sense? That was a lot of information on how to polish a car, and I hope it'll help you out. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go over some basics like how to correctly tape off plastic trim so you don't have to worry about staining it. We're going to talk about the path of travel, where to start first, and then how to actually tackle the whole car, and then things like how to tackle the complex curves like concave curves. So stay tuned and watch part 2. Mike Phillips here. I am the CEO, which stands for Chief Operating Officer. No, it doesn't.